The fluorescent lights of Meridian Corporate Tower buzzed overhead as Joseph Martinez guided his cleaning cart down the marble hallway. Executive voices echoed from behind frosted glass doors, sharp, angry, desperate. A woman's voice cut through clearest of all. This merger agreement is absolutely critical. $50 million people. Joseph hesitated at the conference room door, weathered hands gripping his cart handle. He'd learned to be invisible in this building. 5 years of cleaning up after people who never looked him in the eye had taught him when to enter and when to wait. But tonight's schedule couldn't wait. The board meeting started at 7 a.m. He slipped quietly through the side entrance, hoping to empty the trash bins unnoticed. That's when he saw her, Olivia Richardson, CEO, perfectly styled blonde hair catching the light as she gestured dramatically at Japanese characters projected on the wall. "I'll give him my entire annual salary," she announced, voice dripping with mockery as she pointed directly at Joseph. "Every penny of my seven-figure income if he can accurately translate even one paragraph of this Japanese contract." The room fell silent. Executive eyes turned toward the janitor. "Martinez, ready to earn yourself a $1 million payday." Olivia laughed. Joseph set down his trash bag and looked directly at the CEO. "Ma'am, I accept your offer." The morning alarm cut through Joseph Martinez's dreams at precisely 4:30 a.m. His hand found the clock before his eyes opened, silencing it before it could wake Clara. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet breathing from the small bedroom across the hall, gathering strength for another day. Their apartment wasn't much a small, two-bedroom unit in a building with peeling paint and temperamental plumbing, but it was clean, safe, and only required a 40-minute bus ride to the Meridian Corporate Tower where he had worked for 5 years since everything changed. Joseph eased himself from bed, his body stiff from yesterday's work. At 32, he wasn't old, but years of physical labor had left their mark. In the dim light of dawn, he moved through his morning routine with military precision, habits formed during his time at Columbia University that had served him well through life's unexpected turns. As water heated for coffee, Joseph opened Clara's lunchbox. Inside, he carefully placed a sandwich, cut into a heart shape, an apple sliced to look like a swan, and a small note with today's message: "Be brave today, you're stronger than you think." He'd written a different note every day since Catherine died. 3 years of daily reminders that despite everything, they would be okay. The coffee maker sputtered its last drops as Joseph pulled out his worn leather portfolio. Inside, alongside birth certificates and insurance papers, lay his diplomas: bachelor's in international business, master's in Asian economic systems, certificates of fluency in Japanese Mandarin and Korean, paper memories of a different life. He allowed himself 15 minutes each morning to study financial journals and international news, keeping his mind sharp even as his hands grew calloused. Today's Wall Street Journal featured a piece on Japanese corporate acquisitions in the tech sector. Joseph read with practiced efficiency, mentally translating technical terms and noting patterns in the market. At 5:15, he gently knocked on Clara's door. "Morning sunshine, time to rise and shine." Clara stirred beneath her blanket, a small mountain of pink and purple fabric. At 6 years old, she had her mother's dark curls and his stubbornness. "5 more minutes, Daddy," she mumbled. "The early bird catches the worm," Joseph said, their morning ritual beginning. "But I don't like worms," came the sleepy reply. Joseph smiled. "How about pancakes? Early birds catch pancakes too." A head popped out from under the covers, with blueberry faces. "Is there any other way to make pancakes?" Joseph asked, heartwarming at her smile. While Clara dressed, Joseph prepared breakfast, his mind already mapping out the day ahead. Drop Clara at Mrs. Henderson's, catch the 6:15 bus, start his shift at 7:00 and clean the executive floor before lunch, maintenance closets after lobby before school, pick up home by 6:00 for dinner. Homework, bedtime stories. 5 days a week, every week, for 5 years. Across town in a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, Olivia Richardson was already on her third call of the day. At 35, she commanded Richardson Industries with the same determination that had made her father a legend in the tech world. Her perfectly tailored suit complemented her athletic frame, the result of pre-dawn personal training sessions and a diet calculated for optimal performance. "Jenkins, I need those projections by 9, not 9:30. she said into her earpiece while scanning market reports on her tablet. The Yamamoto team flies in tomorrow, and I won't have them thinking we're unprepared. Her assistant entered silently, depositing a green smoothie on the glass desk before disappearing again. Olivia took a sip without breaking her conversation. Yes, I understand the contract has sections in Japanese. That's why we pay translators obscene amounts of money. What do you mean he's unavailable? Her free hand clenched into a fist, knuckles whitening. Find me someone else. This deal represents $50 million and the future of this company. I don't care if you have to wake up the Emperor of Japan himself. Ending the call, Olivia walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled before her, a kingdom she'd inherited but still needed to prove she deserved. Her father's shadow loomed large over Richardson Industries. Every decision, every deal was measured against Gordon Richardson's legendary success. The Yamamoto merger wasn't just another acquisition. It was her chance to silence the whispers, to prove that Olivia Richardson wasn't just Gordon's daughter, but a visionary in her own right. Nothing would stand in her way. Not language barriers, not cultural differences, not the board's lingering doubts. Her reflection stared back at her from the window, perfectly composed, not a hint of the anxiety churning beneath the surface. She would not fail. Failure wasn't an option for a Richardson. At 7:30 that evening, Joseph pushed his cleaning cart through the executive floor of Meridian Corporate Tower. The day had been longer than usual. An accident in the cafeteria had required immediate attention, pushing back his entire schedule. Now he needed to finish the executive floor quickly to make it home for Claire's bedtime. He paused outside the main conference room, hearing voices inside. The executives usually cleared out by 6:00, leaving him to work in peace. Checking his schedule, he confirmed that the room needed cleaning tonight for tomorrow's board meeting. He'd have to work around them. Joseph knocked softly and entered through the side door, keeping his eyes down. He'd learned that making eye contact sometimes made the executives uncomfortable, as if remembering that the invisible people cleaning their spaces were actually human. I don't care what it takes, a woman's voice cut through the tension in the room. This merger agreement is absolutely critical. $50 million, people. Joseph recognized Olivia Richardson immediately. Everyone in the building knew the CEO by sight. She stood at the head of the conference table, laser pointer directed at Japanese text projected on the wall. Her presence commanded attention, from her designer heels to her perfectly styled blonde hair. The Yamamoto Corporation insists on including this section in Japanese, she continued, frustration evident in her clipped tones. Our regular translator is unreachable until next week. Without understanding these terms, we cannot proceed. Joseph moved quietly around the perimeter of the room, emptying wastebaskets while the executives debated their options. His eyes flickered to the screen, automatically translating the Japanese text, a complex clause about intellectual property rights and technology transfer agreements. Years of muscle memory kicked in as his brain processed the formal Japanese legal terminology. The clause contained subtle linguistic nuance that suggested the Yamamoto Corporation was positioning itself for majority control despite the seemingly equal partnership language. Perhaps we could use an online translator for a general understanding, suggested a nervous-looking executive. Olivia's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Richard, this is a legal document worth millions. We need precise translation, not Google Translate approximations. She turned toward the screen again, frustration evident in her posture. That's when she noticed Joseph emptying the trash bin near the window. Her eyes narrowed, tracking his movements with sudden interest. A cold smile played at the corners of her mouth. You know what, she said, her voice taking on a mocking tone that made the other executives shift uncomfortably. Let's ask our cleaning staff. I bet our janitor here knows all about international business law. Joseph's hands stilled on the trash bag. He could feel every eye in the room turning toward him. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Olivia's smile widened. In fact, I'm so confident that our maintenance worker here can't help us with this sophisticated translation that I'll make him an offer. She paused dramatically. I'll give him my entire annual salary, every single penny of my 7-figure income, if he can accurately translate even one paragraph of this Japanese contract. The room fell dead silent. Joseph's heart hammered against his ribs as Olivia continued, her voice dripping with condescension. What do you say, mister? She glanced at his name tag. Martinez, ready to earn yourself $1 million payday. The other executives looked anywhere but at Joseph, embarrassed by their CEO's cruelty, but too afraid to speak up. Joseph stood frozen, the trash bag still in his hands, as Olivia's mocking laughter filled the room. But something in her laugh, something that reminded him of every person who had ever looked down on him because of his uniform, his job, his circumstances, sparked a fire that had been dormant for too long. A fire that had once driven him through 18-hour study days at Columbia. A fire that had kept him going after Catherine's diagnosis, through the grueling months of her illness, through the funeral arrangements he couldn't afford, through 5 years of raising Clara alone. Joseph slowly set down the trash bag and looked directly at Olivia Richardson. His voice was quiet but steady. "Ma'am, I accept your offer." The conference room felt like it had been drained of oxygen. Olivia's smug expression faltered for just a moment before returning with renewed intensity. She had expected him to shuffle away in embarrassment, maybe mumble an apology. She hadn't expected this quiet dignity, this calm acceptance of her challenge. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" she asked, though everyone in the room had heard him perfectly. Joseph stepped closer to the table, his cleaning uniform a stark contrast to the expensive suits surrounding him. "I said I accept your offer, Miss Richardson. I'll translate your document." The executives exchanged glances, their discomfort growing by the second. Richard loosened his tie as if the air had become too thick to breathe. Nobody knew how to react to this unexpected turn of events. Olivia's laugh came out forced, now higher pitched than before. "This is ridiculous. You're a janitor. You clean toilets and empty trash cans. What could you possibly know about complex legal translation?" "Only one way to find out," Joseph replied evenly. While tension mounted in the conference room 18 miles away, in their modest apartment, Clara Martinez was creating a masterpiece with her crayons. She'd drawn Daddy in his blue uniform, standing tall in front of a big building with lots of windows. In her 6-year-old imagination, her father was the most important person in that building. "Daddy helps make everything clean and pretty," she told Mrs. Henderson, their neighbor, who watched her during Daddy's evening shifts. "He makes the whole building sparkle." Mrs. Henderson, a 70-year-old retired teacher, smiled as she watched Clara carefully color inside the lines. She'd been watching Clara for 3 years now, ever since Catherine's passing. The old woman had grown to love the little girl like her own granddaughter. "Your daddy works very hard," Mrs. Henderson agreed, settling into her armchair with her evening tea. "He's a very special man." Clara nodded seriously, then looked up with those bright brown eyes that were so much like her father's. "Mrs. Henderson, why don't some people like Daddy's job?" Tommy at school said. "His daddy makes lots more money than mine." Wasn't the first time Clara had asked this question, and it broke Mrs. Henderson's heart every time. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that some people measure worth by bank accounts instead of character? "Sweetheart," Mrs. Henderson said gently, "money doesn't make someone important. What makes your daddy special is how much he loves you and how hard he works to take care of you. That's worth more than all the money in the world." Back in the conference room, Olivia had regained her composure and was now treating Joseph's acceptance like an entertaining sideshow. She gestured grandly toward the projection screen. "Very well then, Mr. Martinez. Let's see what you've got." She pointed to the first paragraph of Japanese text. "Start with this section, and remember, everyone in this room will be witnesses to your attempt." Joseph studied the screen for a moment, his mind automatically parsing the complex legal language. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was probably more qualified than anyone in this room to handle this translation. Yet they saw only his uniform. He began to speak, his voice growing stronger with each word. "This section outlines the intellectual property transfer agreements between the two corporations. It specifically states that any technology developed jointly during the merger period will be owned equally by both parties, with licensing rights extending for a period of 15 years post-acquisition." The room went completely silent. Olivia's face had gone pale, the blood draining from her cheeks, as Joseph continued with perfect accuracy and professional terminology. "The subsection here," Joseph continued, pointing to the screen, "clarifies that any pre-existing patents held by either company will remain the sole property of the original holder, but may be licensed to the partner company at preferential rates not to exceed 12% of market value." Richard's mouth fell open. The other executives leaned forward in their chairs, stunned by the precise legal language flowing from their janitor's lips. But Joseph wasn't finished. Something had been unleashed in him, years of hiding his education, his capabilities, his worth. Tonight he was done being invisible. The liability clauses in paragraph 3 establish that both corporations share responsibility for any intellectual property disputes arising from technologies developed during the integration period, with arbitration to be conducted through the International Chamber of Commerce in Tokyo. Olivia gripped the edge of the conference table, her knuckles white against the polished mahogany. The woman who had built her reputation on never being caught off guard now found herself speechless, watching a janitor dismantle every assumption she'd ever made about the people who worked beneath her. The compensation structure outlined here, Joseph gestured to another section of the Japanese text, indicates that Yamamoto Corporation expects a graduated payment schedule with initial transfer fees of $2.5 million followed by quarterly assessments based on technology utilization metrics. As Joseph finished his translation, the silence in the room was deafening. Richard had stopped taking notes entirely, his pen frozen halfway to the paper. The other executives sat motionless, watching this impossible scene unfold before them. Olivia's perfectly controlled facade was cracking. She'd built her entire identity around being the smartest person in every room, the one with all the answers, the leader who commanded respect through superior knowledge and ruthless intelligence. But here stood a man she'd barely noticed in 5 years, speaking with an expertise that made her expensive MBA suddenly feel inadequate. "How?" she whispered, then caught herself louder, more aggressively. "How do you know this?" Joseph met her eyes steadily. "You didn't ask how I knew, Miss Richardson. You offered me your entire salary if I could translate it. The question now is whether you intend to honor your word." The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Every person in that room understood the magnitude of what had just happened. This wasn't just about translation anymore. It was about dignity, respect, and the dangerous assumptions people make about others based on appearances. "Anyone can memorize a few legal terms," Olivia said, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "That doesn't prove you actually understand the nuances of international business law." Joseph nodded calmly. "You're right. Translation without context is just repetition. Would you like me to explain why this particular clause structure suggests that Yamamoto Corporation is likely planning to retain majority control of the merged entity, despite the apparent equal partnership language in the English sections?" The question hit the room like a thunderbolt. This wasn't just translation anymore. This was high-level business analysis that went far beyond what even their expensive consultants had provided. Richard found his voice first. What do you mean by that?" Joseph turned to address the room, his demeanor now completely professional. "The Japanese language allows for subtle implications that don't translate directly into English. The specific verb forms and honorific structures used in this document suggest a hierarchical relationship where Yamamoto views themselves as the senior partner. They're essentially communicating their intention to guide the merger process while allowing Richardson Industries to believe they have equal input." Olivia's face had gone from pale to ashen. This wasn't just embarrassing anymore. This was a potential business catastrophe. If Joseph was right, they were walking into a deal that would essentially hand control of her company to their supposed partners. "That's impossible," she stammered. Joseph shrugged. "Perhaps, but I'd recommend having your legal team verify that interpretation before you sign anything. The cultural context of business negotiations in Japan operates on layers of meaning that aren't immediately apparent to Western readers." The room erupted into whispered conversations as the executives realized the magnitude of what they just learned. But Joseph wasn't done yet. "There's something else you should know about this document," he said, his voice carrying a gravity that made everyone lean forward. He pointed to a specific section of Japanese text that none of them had even noticed before. "This clause here, buried in the technical specifications section, essentially gives Yamamoto Corporation the right to audit and potentially terminate the merger within the first 18 months if they determine that Richardson Industries isn't meeting their cultural compatibility standards." Olivia's hand flew to her throat. Cultural compatibility standards. What does that even mean? "It means they're giving themselves an escape clause disguised as a partnership commitment. If they decide they want to back out of the deal for any reason, market conditions, better opportunities, or simply cold feet, They can claim cultural incompatibility and walk away with all the intellectual property you'll have shared during the integration period. Richard's face had gone gray, and he was frantically scribbling notes. The other executives looked like they'd just witnessed a car accident in slow motion. The timing structure they've proposed would have you transferring your core technologies, uh, um, our technologies in month 3, while their reciprocal technology transfers don't begin until month 8. If they invoke the cultural compatibility clause in month 6, you'll have given them everything while receiving nothing in return. Olivia sank into her chair, the full implications hitting her like a physical blow. This merger wasn't just her biggest deal. It was supposed to be her legacy, the move that would cement her reputation as a visionary CEO. Instead, she'd nearly walked into a trap that would have destroyed everything her father had built. How she began, then stopped. How do you know all this? For the first time since the confrontation began, Joseph's professional demeanor softened slightly. I spent 4 years studying international business at Columbia University with a focus on Asian markets and cross-cultural negotiations. I was fluent in Japanese and Mandarin before I ever set foot in this building. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Richard looked up from his frantic note-taking, his expression a mixture of confusion and amazement. Then why are you working as a janitor? Joseph's smile was tired, carrying the weight of choices made and paths not taken. Life doesn't always go according to plan, Mr. Richardson. Sometimes you do what you have to do to take care of the people you love. In their apartment across town, Clara was curled up in Mrs. Henderson's lap, listening to a bedtime story about a princess who discovered that the kindest person in her kingdom was someone she'd never noticed before. Clara's eyes were getting heavy, but she fought sleep because she wanted to wait up for Daddy. Mrs. Henderson, she mumbled against the old woman's shoulder. In the story, does the princess realize how special the kind person is? Yes, sweetheart. Mrs. Henderson whispered, stroking Clara's dark hair. Sometimes it takes a long time, but good people always get recognized eventually. I hope Daddy gets recognized soon, Clara said drowsily. He deserves all the recognition in the whole world. Back in the conference room, Olivia was struggling with emotions she rarely allowed herself to feel. Shame, embarrassment, and something else, a growing realization of how wrong she'd been. Not just about Joseph, but about her entire approach to leadership. The salary offer, she said quietly, not meeting Joseph's eyes. You actually earned it. Joseph shook his head. Miss Richardson, I don't want your salary. I never did. I just wanted to be treated with the same respect you'd give anyone else in this room. The simple dignity of his response made several of the executives shift uncomfortably in their chairs. They all knew they were guilty of the same blindness, the same casual dismissal of the people who kept their world running. Olivia looked up at him, then really seeing him for perhaps the first time in 5 years. What do you want? Joseph was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of dreams deferred, but not abandoned. I want the chance to use my education for something more than emptying trash cans. I want my daughter to see that knowledge and hard work are valued, not just tolerated. And I want to help this company succeed because despite everything, I believe it can be better than it is. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like possibility. Olivia stood slowly, her earlier arrogance replaced by something that looked almost like humility. Mr. Martinez, would you be willing to join our international negotiations team as a senior consultant? Joseph met her eyes steadily. Under one condition. Name it. No one in this company gets treated as invisible again. Not the janitors, not the security guards, not the cafeteria workers. Everyone gets treated with dignity. Olivia nodded slowly. Agreed. But as the meeting began to break up, and the executives filed out chattering excitedly about their narrow escape from disaster, neither Olivia nor Joseph realized that their biggest challenges were still ahead. Joseph walked toward the bus stop that night with a heart fuller than it had been in years. The weight of invisibility had lifted, replaced by a strange lightness he had almost forgotten. His steps quickened as he thought of telling Clara. Not about the money that had never been the point, but about being seen, about using it in his mind again, about building something she could be proud of. The night air carried a hint of coming rain, but Joseph barely noticed. His mind was already mapping out strategies for the Yamamoto negotiations, identifying leverage points, planning counterproposals. The rusty gears of his business acumen, dormant for so long, were turning again, picking up speed with every block. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Henderson. "Clara finally fell asleep. Left key under mat. She drew you something special today." Joseph smiled, quickening his pace. The last bus would leave in 10 minutes. If he hurried, he could still make it home to see Clara's drawing before morning. As he rounded the corner to the bus stop, he nearly collided with a figure huddled under the shelter. "Excuse me," Joseph said automatically, then stopped short when he recognized Richard Richardson, the vice president he'd met in the conference room. Richard looked up startled. "Martinez, what are you doing here?" Joseph gestured to the bus schedule. "Heading home, sir. Last bus leaves at 11:15. Understanding dawned on Richard's face. "You take the bus every day." "Every day for 5 years," Joseph confirmed, checking his watch. 7 minutes until the bus arrived. Richard shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to such conversations. "Look, Martinez, what happened in there tonight, that was impressive. Scary as hell for all of us, but impressive." "Thank you, sir. But I want to be clear about something." Richard's voice hardened slightly. "Olivia makes emotional decisions sometimes. This consultant position, it's not going to be easy. There are people who won't accept you no matter what your qualifications are." Joseph met the other man's gaze evenly. "With all due respect, Mr. Richardson, I've spent 5 years being treated like I'm invisible. I doubt anything could be harder than that." The rumble of the approaching bus ended their conversation. As Joseph turned to board, Richard called after him. "Martinez, one more thing. How did you end up," he gestured vaguely, "cleaning floors?" Joseph paused on the bus steps, one hand on the railing. The question struck at the heart of everything that had brought him to this moment, Columbia Catherine. The medical bills, the funeral costs, the desperate search for any job that would let him care for Clara. "That's a long story, Mr. Richardson," he said finally. "Perhaps another time." The bus doors closed, and Joseph found a seat near the back, watching the glittering towers of downtown recede into the distance. In less than 24 hours, he would return to those same towers, but everything would be different. He would be different. His weathered hands that had scrubbed floors and emptied trash for 5 years now rested on his knees. Tomorrow, those same hands would shape business strategies and international negotiations. The thought sent a surge of both excitement and terror through him. Could he do this after so long away from the business world? Could he step back in and succeed? For Clara's sake, he had to try. The bus rumbled through darkened neighborhoods, carrying its late-night passengers toward homes and families and responsibilities. Joseph leaned his head against the window, watching raindrops begin to streak the glass. Each drop caught the city lights, transforming them into prisms of color against the darkness. Like his life suddenly transformed by a moment of recognition, by someone finally seeing him as he truly was. The bus stopped 6 blocks from their apartment building. Joseph pulled his jacket collar up against the increasing rain and began to walk, his mind still churning with the events of the evening. So focused was he on his thoughts that he didn't notice the sleek black car following slowly behind him until it pulled alongside. The passenger window lowered with a soft electric hum. Olivia Richardson leaned across the seat, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Get in, Martinez. We need to talk." Joseph hesitated, rain dripping from his hair onto his face. "It's late, Miss Richardson, and I need to get home to my daughter." "This won't take long," she insisted, pushing the door open. "And it's pouring. Consider it your first executive perk, a dry ride home." After a moment's consideration, Joseph climbed in the luxury of the vehicle, a stark contrast to his wet clothes and worn work boots. The leather seat adjusted automatically to his frame, the interior smelling of expensive perfume and new car. Olivia studied him in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Without the conference room's bright fluorescence, her features seemed softer, less severe. "Where to?" Joseph gave his address, watching as she entered it into the navigation system. The car moved smoothly into the rain-slicked street. "I owe you an apology," Olivia said abruptly, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "What I did tonight, it was cruel. Deliberately cruel." Joseph remained silent, waiting. "I've been thinking about why I did it," she continued. "Why I felt the need to humiliate someone just doing their job." Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. "And I realized it's because I'm terrified." This confession, so unexpected from the confident REO he'd observed for years, caught Joseph by surprise. Terrified of what? Failure. The word hung in the air between them. My father built Richardson Industries from nothing. He was brilliant, ruthless, respected. When he died, the board almost passed me over for CEO. Too young, too inexperienced, too emotional, she mimicked. I've spent every day since then proving them wrong. And the Yamamoto deal was going to be your vindication, Joseph guessed. Olivia nodded. $50 million in a foothold in Asian markets. The kind of deal my father would have made. The kind of deal that would have destroyed your company, Joseph corrected gently. She flinched but didn't disagree. When I saw you tonight, someone I've barely noticed for years translate and analyze that contract better than our entire legal team, it was like the floor dropped out from under me. Like everything I thought I knew about leadership, about judging people's worth, just evaporated. They drove in silence for several blocks, the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers filling the space between them. Why didn't you ever say anything, Olivia finally asked, about your background, your education? 5 years is a long time to stay silent. Joseph looked out at the rain, gathering his thoughts. When my wife Catherine got sick, everything changed. The medical bills, the specialists, none of it covered by insurance. I took a leave of absence from my firm thinking it would be temporary. But then, his voice faltered, the memory still raw after 3 years. The cancer moved quickly. By the time she died, I'd lost my position, drained our savings, sold our house. I had a 2-year-old daughter and nothing else. No references, no recent work history, mounting debt. And no one would hire you, Olivia guessed. Not in my field, not with a gap in my resume and a toddler at home needing stable hours. Joseph's laugh held no humor. The irony is I applied for an administrative position at Richardson Industries first, was told I was overqualified. The maintenance job was the only one that offered health insurance for Clara. Olivia turned onto a street, the car's headlights illuminating puddles in the worn facades of apartment buildings. And now, what do you want now, Joseph Martinez? For the first time, she'd used his first name. The question hung between them, not a CEO's demand, but something more personal, more genuine. I want what I've always wanted, he said simply, to use my mind to build something worthwhile, to give Clara a father she can be proud of, to be seen for who I am, not what job I do. Olivia stopped the car in front of his building, a shabby 5-story walk-up with peeling paint and security bars on the lower windows. She studied the building, then turned to look at him fully. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., my office. We have 48 hours to prepare a counter-strategy for the Yamamoto negotiations. Her voice had regained some of its executive crispness, but something had changed in her eyes. Wear whatever you want, we'll sort out a wardrobe later. Bring any materials you have on Japanese business culture and cross-border intellectual property rights. Joseph nodded, hand on the door handle. I'll be there. And Joseph, she added as he stepped out into the rain, bring a picture of your daughter. I'd like to know who we're doing this for. As the black car pulled away, Joseph stood in the rain for a moment, letting the water wash over him. 5 years of invisibility, of silent endurance, had ended in a single evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles. But tonight, for the first time in too long, he felt the weight of possibility on his shoulders instead of defeat. He climbed the stairs to apartment 3B, found the key under the mat as promised, and entered quietly. The small living room was dimly lit by a single lamp. Mrs. Henderson had fallen asleep in the armchair, an open book on her lap. On the coffee table lay Clara's drawing, Joseph in his blue uniform, standing tall beside a gleaming skyscraper, the words, "My daddy makes everything better," written in careful first-grade script. Joseph gently woke Mrs. Henderson, thanked her, and saw her safely to her own apartment down the hall. Then he stood in Clara's doorway, watching his daughter sleep, one arm wrapped around her stuffed elephant, dark curls splayed across the pillow. In sleep, she looked so much like Catherine that it made his heart ache. "Things are going to change, sweetheart," he whispered. "I promise." As he prepared for bed, Joseph pulled out his old leather portfolio. Inside, alongside his degrees and certificates, he found a photograph he hadn't looked at in years, himself and Catherine on graduation day at Columbia, both beaming with pride and possibility, arms wrapped around each other beneath spring cherry blossoms. "I wish you could see this," he murmured to the smiling face of his late wife. "Think I finally found my way back." Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean for whatever tomorrow might bring. Part 2, Confrontation. Joseph Martinez stood before the bathroom mirror at 5:45 a.m., studying his reflection with critical eyes. The man staring back at him seemed caught between two worlds, his face still bearing the weariness of years of physical labor, but his eyes bright with renewed purpose. He'd woken an hour earlier than usual, mind racing with strategies for the Yamamoto negotiations. "Daddy, are you going to wear your blue uniform today?" Clara asked from the doorway, still in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. Joseph smiled, kneeling to her level. "Not today, sweetheart. Remember how I told you I'm starting a new job at the same building? I need to wear something different." Clara's eyes widened, like a superhero changing clothes. "Something like that." Joseph laughed, smoothing her wild curls. "Except my superpower is just talking to people about business." "That's a boring superpower," Clara declared, scrunching her nose. Joseph opened the small closet where he kept his few non-work clothes. The options were limited: a navy blue suit he hadn't worn since Catherine's funeral, two dress shirts, one pair of decent slacks, and a tie Clara had given him for Father's Day last year. It featured cartoon dinosaurs wearing business suits. "What do you think, Clara? Professional enough for my first day?" He held up the tie, watching her face light up. "Yes, the T-Rex looks just like you." Mrs. Henderson arrived early to watch Clara, bringing with her a thermos of coffee and a knowing smile. "Today's the big day, isn't it? Clara told me everything about your superhero job." Joseph nodded, straightening his dinosaur tie in the hallway mirror. "I'm not sure it's quite superhero level, but it's a start." The old woman studied him with shrewd eyes. "You know, Joseph, in all the years I've known you, this is the first time I've seen you look like yourself." He paused, struck by her observation. "What do you mean? That uniform never suited you." "Not really. It was just something you wore while waiting." She pressed the coffee thermos into his hands. "Don't look so surprised. I may be old, but I recognize when someone is meant for more than they've settled for." Joseph's throat tightened unexpectedly. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Henderson. For being there for Clara, for—" She waved away his gratitude. "Go on now. Show them what you're made of." The bus ride to Meridian Corporate Tower felt different that morning. Joseph sat straighter, his mind no longer dulled by the routine of the past 5 years. Instead, he reviewed everything he knew about Yamamoto Corporation, their corporate structure, acquisition history, negotiation tactics. By the time the bus stopped at his familiar corner, he had outlined 3 potential counter-strategies. The security guard at the main entrance did a double take as Joseph approached. "Martinez, that's you, Tom." "Morning, Frank," Joseph replied, suddenly aware of how strange it must seem, the janitor in a suit arriving during executive hours. Frank checked his clipboard, eyebrows rising. "Well, I'll be damned. Says here you're to get an executive access card." Reporting to Miss Richardson directly, his voice carried equal parts surprise and respect. "That's right." Frank shook his head in amazement as he processed the new ID card. "Always knew you were different, Martinez. The way you talked, how you carried yourself, never seemed to fit with pushing that cleaning cart." He handed over the glossy access card. "Don't forget us little people now that you're heading upstairs." Joseph pocketed the card, meeting the older man's eyes. "I was never one of the big people, Frank. Just trying to provide for my daughter like everyone else." The executive elevator, a space Joseph had previously only entered to clean, whisked him to the 35th floor. As the doors opened onto polished marble and floor-to-ceiling windows, he felt a momentary vertigo. For 5 years, he had moved through these spaces like a ghost, ignored and unacknowledged. Now every head turned as he stepped off the elevator. Whispers followed him down the hallway. Administrative assistants paused their typing to stare. A group of young analysts huddled together, not bothering to lower their voices. "That's him, the janitor, who's suddenly a consultant. I heard he blackmailed Richardson somehow. My boss says he's some kind of savant, speaks 5 languages, but can't hold a real job." Joseph kept his eyes forward, spine straight, father's advice echoing in his mind. "Your dignity isn't determined by what others think of you, son. It's determined by what you know about yourself." Olivia's executive assistant, a razor-thin woman named Patricia, intercepted him before he reached the CEO's office. Her expression suggested she'd just discovered something unpleasant on the bottom of her designer shoe. Mr. Martinez, she said, the title sounding foreign on her tongue. Miss Richardson is waiting for you in the war room, not her office. Follow me. The War Room, Richardson Industries' strategic planning center, occupied the northeast corner of the executive floor. Joseph had cleaned its windows and emptied its trash bins countless times, always after hours when the space was empty. Now, as Patricia opened the heavy double doors, he found it transformed into a command center for the Yamamoto negotiations. Digital screens covered the walls, displaying market analysis, competitor profiles, and translation matrices. The central table was buried under stacks of documents, legal binders, and financial projections. And at the head of the chaos stood Olivia Richardson, phone pressed to her ear, free hand gesturing emphatically at a young analyst who looked ready to faint. I don't care what time it is in Tokyo, she was saying. Get me those quarterly reports before noon, or... She spotted Joseph and abruptly changed tone. I'll call you back. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward the newcomer. Joseph recognized several faces from last night's conference room confrontation, including Richard, who was studying him with undisguised skepticism. Olivia crossed the room in 4 decisive strides, extending her hand. Mr. Martinez, right on time. Joseph shook her hand firmly. Miss Richardson, she gestured to the assembled team. Everyone, this is Joseph Martinez, our new senior consultant on Asian markets. He'll be leading our strategy revisions for the Yamamoto negotiations. A muscle twitched in Richard's jaw. Leading Olivia, we discussed adding Mr. Martinez as an advisor, not... Things change, Richard, Olivia cut him off, especially when we discover we're walking into a trap. She turned to Joseph. I had the team pull every document related to the Yamamoto deal. The preliminary agreement, market analysis, our original strategy. Everything's here. Joseph surveyed the room, noting the mix of curiosity and resentment on the faces watching him. These people had worked on this deal for months. His sudden elevation must seem incomprehensible, perhaps even threatening. Thank you, he said, addressing the room rather than just Olivia. I know this must seem unusual. 5 years cleaning this building, and now I'm standing here asking for your trust. He paused, meeting each person's gaze directly. I don't expect that trust immediately. You don't know me, but I hope you'll judge me by what I contribute, not by what I used to do. A young woman at the end of the table, Asian American, perhaps mid-20s, with intelligent eyes, spoke up. You really found hidden clauses in the Japanese version that weren't in the English translation. Joseph nodded. Yes, deliberately concealed through specific language choices that wouldn't be apparent to non-native speakers. That's terrifying, she said, looking genuinely disturbed. I've been working on our intellectual property protection strategy for months, assuming good faith negotiations. And you are, Joseph asked. Jennifer Chen, Deputy Counsel IP Division. Joseph moved to the table, selecting one of the legal documents. Ms. Chen, if you're handling IP protection, you'll want to see this first. He flipped to a specific page, pointing to a Japanese clause. This section uses a specific honorific structure that subtly positions Yamamoto as the senior partner with primary claim to all jointly developed technologies. Jennifer leaned forward, studying the text with new eyes. Can you walk me through exactly how the language creates that implication? Just like that, the ice began to crack. Jennifer's genuine interest opened the door for others. Within 15 minutes, Joseph was deep in explanation, using a whiteboard to diagram the linguistic nuances that disguise Yamamoto's true intentions. The room's energy shifted palpably as understanding dawned. These weren't just abstract concerns. Joseph was exposing direct threats to their company's assets, to projects they had personally invested months developing. Son of a bitch, Richard muttered, reviewing the translation Joseph provided. They would have owned everything within 6 months. Olivia stood slightly apart, watching the transformation with calculating eyes. Joseph caught her gaze across the room. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. This was working better than either had anticipated. All right, Olivia said, reclaiming the room's attention. We have 48 hours before the Yamamoto team arrives. I want a complete counter strategy that protects our interests without derailing the partnership potential. Martinez, you have the floor. What's our approach? Joseph moved to the head of the table, a position that would have been unthinkable yesterday. First, we need to understand exactly what Yamamoto wants from this deal. Not what they say they want, what they actually want. He picked up a marker and began writing on the whiteboard. Based on my analysis of their approach, Yamamoto has three primary objectives: access to Richardson's quantum encryption technology entry into Western markets through an established brand and acquisition of our engineering talent without the cost of direct recruitment. Richard frowned. How could you possibly know that you've been here less than an hour? Because I've been studying Yamamoto for years, Joseph replied evenly. Not for Richardson Industries, for myself. Japanese business journals, acquisition patterns, leadership profiles. When you're invisible, you have time to read. The simple truth silenced Richard more effectively than any defense could have. Joseph continued, our approach needs to acknowledge their objectives while protecting our core assets. I propose a three-part strategy. First, a partnership structure. Instead of a merger with clear technology licensing agreements rather than transfers of ownership. He drew a diagram on the board illustrating the relationship. Second, a phased implementation that requires reciprocal technology sharing at each stage. We give nothing until we receive equal value. More notation on the board, a timeline with checkpoints. Third, and most importantly, we address the cultural dimension directly. Yamamoto's leadership values face-saving and honor above immediate financial gain. We give them a way to retreat from their aggressive posture while still achieving their core objectives. Jennifer looked up from her notes. How exactly do we do that? We bring in a cultural intermediary they respect, someone who can bridge the gap between our companies without either side losing face. Joseph turned to Olivia. I'd like to contact Dr. Kenji Tanaka, my former professor at Columbia. He has connections within Yamamoto's senior leadership. Olivia nodded without hesitation. Make it happen. For the next several hours, Joseph led the team through a complete dismantling and rebuilding of their negotiation strategy. His knowledge of Japanese business culture proved invaluable, but it was his strategic thinking, sharp and incisive, after years of disuse, that truly impressed. By lunchtime, even Richard had grudgingly begun deferring to Joseph's judgment on key points. The atmosphere had transformed from skepticism to focused collaboration. When Olivia called a break for lunch, Joseph found himself surrounded by team members with questions, ideas, and most surprisingly, respect in their eyes. Martinez, Olivia's voice cut through the chatter. A word in my office. He followed her through the busy hallway, aware of the stares following them, the CEO and the former janitor now apparently equals. Olivia's corner office offered a stunning panoramic view of the city. Joseph had cleaned those windows hundreds of times, always, after hours, never pausing to appreciate the vista they framed. Now Olivia gestured for him to take a seat across from her desk in a chair worth more than his monthly rent. You're exceeding expectations, she said without preamble. The team is responding better than I anticipated. They're good people, Joseph replied. They just needed to see the bigger picture. Did you bring it the photo of your daughter? The request caught him off guard. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small, somewhat worn photograph of Clara on her 6th birthday, beaming at the camera with chocolate cake on her face. Olivia studied it with unexpected softness in her expression. She has your eyes. What's her name? Clara, she's 6. And her mother, Joseph's hand tightened imperceptibly on the armrest. Catherine, she died 3 years ago. Cancer. Olivia nodded, absorbing this information without the awkward platitudes people usually offered. That explains a lot. She handed the photo back. You've done remarkable work this morning, the Martinez. But I need to warn you, not everyone is going to welcome your sudden rise. I'm aware of that. Are you... Her eyes narrowed. Because the board of directors is already asking questions. 3 senior vice presidents have requested meetings with me today alone. The company grapevine is churning with rumors about how you managed to jump from janitor to senior consultant overnight. Joseph met her gaze steadily. What have you told them? The truth. That you exposed critical flaws in the Yamamoto contract that our entire legal team missed. That your expertise in Japanese business culture is saving us from a potential disaster. She leaned forward. But the truth isn't always enough, Martinez. People prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. Well, meaning there are powerful people in this company who won't accept that they overlooked a valuable asset for 5 years. It's easier to believe you're manipulating the situation somehow. Joseph absorbed this, not entirely surprised. I'm not looking for corporate politics, Miss Richardson. I just want to do meaningful work and provide for my daughter. Noble, she acknowledged, but naive. The moment you stepped into that war room as a consultant instead of a janitor, you entered the arena. And in the corporate arena, people fight to protect their territory. Before Joseph could respond, Olivia's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression hardening. Right on cue. The executive committee wants an emergency meeting about you. She stood straightening her immaculate suit. I'll handle it. You get back to the team and continue developing our counter strategy. Joseph remained seated. May I ask you something first? She paused, hand on the door. What? Why are you doing this? Defending me, promoting me going against your own executives. Yesterday, I was just the man who cleaned your office. Olivia was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. Because I was wrong about you. Completely embarrassingly wrong. And in business, when you discover you've made a strategic error, you don't double down, you correct course immediately. Her smile was slight but genuine, even if it means promoting the janitor. Back in the war room, Joseph found the team energized and focused, building on his morning framework. Jennifer Chen had taken particular initiative developing a comprehensive IP protection strategy based on his guidance. Martinez, she said as he rejoined them, I've been thinking about your phased implementation approach. What if we structure it around technical milestones rather than calendar dates? That way, if Yamamoto tries to delay their contributions, our transfers are automatically delayed as well. Joseph smiled appreciatively. That's excellent thinking, Ms. Chen. Can you draft language for that? She nodded eagerly, clearly pleased by the recognition. For the next several hours, Joseph lost himself in the work, real challenging intellectual work of the kind he hadn't experienced since before Catherine's illness. His mind felt like a powerful engine finally being allowed to run at full capacity after years of idling. He didn't notice the time passing until Richard approached him with an unexpected invitation. Martinez, a few of us are heading to Brooks Bar to continue the discussion over drinks. Would you care to join us? Joseph checked his watch, suddenly remembering Clara. I appreciate the offer, but I need to get home to my daughter. Richard seemed genuinely disappointed. Another time, perhaps. The team is making real progress thanks to your insights. As Joseph gathered his notes, his phone rang Mrs. Henderson's number. A spike of alarm shot through him as he answered. Is everything all right? Is Clara okay? She's fine, Joseph, Mrs. Henderson assured him. But my sister has had a fall. I need to go to her in Baltimore more tonight. I've called everyone I know, but I can't find anyone to watch Clara tomorrow. Joseph's heart sank. One day into his new position, and already he was facing the familiar work-parent dilemma that had limited his options for years. I understand. I'll figure something out. You take care of your sister. He ended the call, mind racing through possibilities. No school tomorrow, teacher workday. His usual backup sitters all worked weekdays. Daycare centers wouldn't take a child for just one day without prior registration. Problem? Jennifer asked, noticing his expression. Childcare emergency, Joseph admitted. My regular sitter has a family situation. Jennifer looked sympathetic but had no solution to offer. Joseph began packing his briefcase, resignation settling over him. He would have to call Olivia, explain the situation, stay home tomorrow with Clara. Just as his opportunity was finally emerging, reality was pulling him back. Martinez. Olivia's voice cut through his thoughts as she strode back into the war room. How are we progressing? The team has made excellent headway on the counter strategy, he reported, pushing aside his personal concerns. Ms. Chen has developed a milestone-based implementation structure that should neutralize Yamamoto's delay tactics. Olivia nodded approvingly. Good. The executive committee has been addressed. We can proceed without interference. She glanced around the room. Where is everyone? Dinner break. Richard invited me to join them at Brooks Bar, but I need to get home. Something in his tone must have alerted her. Is everything all right? Joseph hesitated, then decided on honesty. My childcare arrangements for tomorrow have fallen through. My regular sitter has a family emergency. Olivia's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with calculation. I see. And this presents a problem because I have a 6-year-old daughter who can't stay home alone and no school tomorrow. He squared his shoulders, preparing for the inevitable setback. I'll need to work from home tomorrow. Unacceptable, Olivia said flatly. We have 36 hours until the Yamamoto team arrives. Every minute is critical. I understand, but Bring her. Joseph blinked, certain he'd misheard. I'm sorry. Your daughter, bring her to the office tomorrow. Olivia spoke as if suggesting the most obvious solution in the world. We have an executive daycare center on the fourth floor for emergencies. I didn't know that existed. Of course you didn't. It's not advertised to maintenance staff. Olivia's tone carried no apology, just pragmatic efficiency. I'll make the arrangements. Be here at 7:30 tomorrow with your daughter. Now show me what the team has developed so far. The abrupt shift back to business left Joseph momentarily disoriented, but he quickly refocused, walking Olivia through the day's progress. Her incisive questions and strategic adjustments revealed why she had risen to CEO, despite the board's initial reservations. As they worked, a thought nagged at him. Olivia Richardson was not the person he had observed from afar for 5 years. The dismissive, arrogant executive he had cleaned up after was revealing layers of complexity he hadn't anticipated. Strategic brilliance, decisive leadership, and now an unexpected accommodation for his parental responsibilities. The woman was a puzzle, and Joseph wasn't sure if he was seeing the real Olivia Richardson for the first time, or if she was simply adapting her approach to extract maximum value from her new asset. Either way, the dynamic between them had shifted into unfamiliar territory. By the time Joseph left the office that evening, darkness had settled over the city. The bus ride home felt surreal, his mind still in the war room while his body traveled the same route it had taken for 5 years. Same streets, same stops, but everything changed. He found Mrs. Henderson packing a small overnight bag, Clara helping by folding socks with solemn concentration. "Daddy," she cried when he entered, launching herself into his arms. "Mrs. Henderson has to go help her sister who fell down. I told her sisters are important because they're family and family always comes first. That's what you always say." Joseph hugged her tightly. "That's exactly right, sweetheart." Mrs. Henderson looked apologetic. "I'm so sorry about the timing, Joseph, just when things are looking up for you." "It's been handled," he assured her. "Clara's coming to work with me tomorrow." Clara's eyes widened. "To your superhero job, really? Really, there's a special place where you can play while I work, and you'll get to see the big building from the inside." The little girl's excitement was palpable as she bounced on her toes. "Can I bring my drawing stuff? I want to draw you being a superhero businessman." "Of course." After Mrs. Henderson departed and Clara was tucked into bed, Joseph sat at their small kitchen table with his notes spread before him. He'd brought home copies of key documents to review, a habit from his previous career that felt both familiar and strange to resume. His phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. "Tanaka confirmed for video conference 9 a.m. tomorrow." "Oh." Joseph stared at the message, realizing it must be from Olivia herself, not her assistant. He saved the number and replied, "Thank you. We'll be ready." As he returned to his work, Joseph felt the weight of tomorrow's significance. Kenji Tanaka had been more than just his professor. He had been a mentor, a guide who had seen potential in a scholarship student that others had overlooked. Their reconnection after all these years might be the key to salvaging the Yamamoto deal. The irony wasn't lost on him. Tomorrow, Clara would enter the building he'd worked in for 5 years, but she would see her father in a completely different light. Not as the invisible man who cleaned floors after hours, but as someone whose words commanded attention, whose ideas shaped strategy. The thought both exhilarated and terrified him. What if he failed? What if he couldn't deliver the solution Olivia expected? What if the years of mental dormancy had dulled his edge beyond recovery? Joseph pushed the doubts aside, focusing instead on the Japanese contract language. One phrase at a time, one strategy point at a time. The path forward was through preparation, not worry. Outside the city, lights twinkled against the night sky, a constellation of possibilities that had seemed unreachable just 24 hours ago. The next morning arrived with the soft golden light of early autumn. Joseph woke before his alarm mind already cycling through the day's agenda. Clara proved surprisingly cooperative about the early departure, her excitement about visiting Daddy's superhero office, overriding her usual morning resistance. "Do I look professional enough?" she asked seriously, twirling to display her chosen outfit, a purple dress with yellow leggings and light-up sneakers. "Absolutely," Joseph assured her, "the most professional 6-year-old I've ever seen." They caught the early bus, Clara clutching her backpack filled with coloring books, snacks, and her favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunks. She pressed her face against the window as the city woke around them, asking questions about everything they passed. Is your office at the very top, Daddy? Like a castle tower? Not quite the top, but very high up. Higher than the clouds. On rainy days sometimes. Her innocent questions calmed his nerves, grounding him in what truly mattered. Whatever happened today, success or failure, Clara would still look at him with those trusting eyes. He would still be her father, her protector, her hero. Arriving at Meridian Corporate Tower, Joseph felt a surge of pride as he guided Clara through the grand lobby he had previously only traversed in a maintenance uniform. Frank, the security guard, broke into a wide smile at the sight of them. Well, now who's this young lady? My name is Clara Martinez, she announced with a small curtsy that Mrs. Henderson had taught her. I'm visiting my daddy's superhero office today. Frank chuckled, winking at Joseph. Superhero office, eh? That's about right. He crouched to Clara's level. You know your daddy is doing very important work up there. He's helping the whole company. Clara nodded solemnly. That's because he's the smartest daddy in the world. He knows everything. The simple, absolute faith in her statement tightened Joseph's throat unexpectedly. The executive elevator carried them upward, Clara watching in fascination as the floor numbers climbed higher and higher. When the doors opened onto the 35th floor, she gasped at the panoramic views of the city. Daddy, we can see everything from here. Several early arriving executives turned at the sound of a child's voice, expressions ranging from surprise to disapproval. Joseph guided Clara through the hallway with a protective hand on her shoulder. Patricia intercepted them before they reached the executive daycare, her thin lips pressed into a line of disapproval. Martinez, Miss Richardson informed me about your situation. Her eyes flickered to Clara with barely concealed distaste. The child care center doesn't typically accept drop-ins without prior registration and immunization records. Miss Richardson said she would make arrangements, Joseph replied evenly, feeling Clara press closer to his side. Yes, well, Patricia's tone suggested she found the entire situation highly irregular. Miss Richardson has indeed overridden standard protocol. I'll escort you to the center. As they followed Patricia's clicking heels down the hallway, Clara whispered, Daddy, that lady doesn't smile. Is her face broken? Joseph bit back a laugh. No, sweetheart. Some people just save their smiles for special occasions. The executive daycare center was a revelation, a bright, spacious environment with state-of-the-art educational equipment, 2 professional caregivers, and only 3 other children present. Joseph had cleaned on this floor countless times, but had never known this space existed. Wilkins, the head caregiver, welcomed Clara warmly, showing none of Patricia's disdain. We're doing a science project this morning, building model volcanoes. Would you like to join us, Clara? Clara looked up at Joseph uncertainly. He knelt to her level, straightening the collar of her purple dress. You're going to have a great time here while I work sunshine, and I'll come check on you during my lunch break, okay? She nodded bravely. Promise you won't forget I'm here. Clara Martinez, I could never ever forget you're here. He touched his heart. You're always right here even when we're apart. With Clara settled, Joseph headed to the war room where he found Olivia already reviewing the previous day's work. Your daughter gets settled in all right? She asked without looking up from her tablet. Yes, thank you for arranging it. She waved away his gratitude. It was a simple logistical solution to maintain our productivity. Before he could respond, Jennifer Chen hurried in, followed by Richard and several other team members. The room quickly filled with focused energy as everyone prepared for the day's critical video conference with Dr. Tanaka. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the main screen flickered to life, revealing the distinguished figure of Kenji Tanaka. At 65, the professor still maintained the precise posture and thoughtful expression that Joseph remembered from his Columbia days. The familiar sight of his mentor brought an unexpected wave of emotion. Joseph-san, Dr. Tanaka greeted him with a slight bow. It has been too long. Joseph returned the bow deeper and more respectful. Tanaka-sensei, thank you for agreeing to speak with us on such short notice. Dr. Tanaka's eyes crinkled with genuine warmth. When I received your message, I could hardly believe it. My most promising student, disappeared for years now, suddenly resurfaced at Richardson Industries. His gaze shifted to Olivia. Miss Richardson, your company is fortunate to have secured Joseph's expertise. At Columbia, his insights into cross-cultural business dynamics were revolutionary. Olivia inclined her head in acknowledgement. We've recently discovered Mr. Martinez's value professor. That's why we've asked for your assistance with our current situation. For the next hour, Joseph outlined the Yamamoto contract issues for Dr. Tanaka, who listened with growing concern. The older man's expression darkened as he recognized the intentional deception embedded in the Japanese clauses. This is most disturbing, Dr. Tanaka said finally. Such tactics dishonor the spirit of partnership. They are not consistent with Yamamoto Corporation's traditional business ethics. He paused, considering. Who is leading their negotiation team? Keisuke Yamamoto, Joseph replied, the president's nephew. Understanding dawned in Dr. Tanaka's eyes. Ah, now I see. He leaned closer to the camera. Joseph-san Keisuke Yamamoto represents a new generation of Japanese business leaders, aggressive Western-influenced impatient. His approach has caused concern among the old guard, including his uncle Hiroshi Yamamoto. The president, Olivia clarified. Yes, Hiroshi-san and I attended university together many years ago. We have maintained a friendship despite the competitive nature of our professional circles. Dr. Tanaka's expression turned thoughtful. I believe Hiroshi-san may be unaware of his nephew's tactics in this negotiation. Joseph exchanged a glance with Olivia, seeing the same realization in her eyes. A back channel, he suggested. Dr. Tanaka nodded. I could speak with Hiroshi-san directly. If these deceptive practices are happening without his knowledge, it would give him a face-saving way to correct course, Joseph finished, without embarrassing his nephew publicly. Precisely, Dr. Tanaka's approval was evident. You still understand the importance of honor in Japanese business culture, Joseph-san. Would President Yamamoto be open to a different structure entirely? Olivia interjected. We've been developing a partnership model instead of a merger one that would achieve the core objectives for both companies while maintaining appropriate safeguards. If presented correctly, yes. Dr. Tanaka nodded, especially if it allows him to discipline his nephew privately while preserving the business opportunity. As the call continued, the strategy crystallized. Dr. Tanaka would approach President Yamamoto directly, presenting the partnership model as a more honorable alternative to the problematic merger terms. Joseph would lead the restructured negotiations, focusing on mutual benefit and cultural respect, rather than confronting the deception directly. When the video conference ended, a palpable sense of hope filled the war room. For the first time, they had a clear path forward, one that might not only salvage the deal, but improve it. Excellent work, everyone, Olivia announced. Let's finalize the partnership proposal. Martinez, I want you and Jennifer to draft the new terms. Richard, prepare the financial projections based on the revised structure. We reconvene at 3 to review everything. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Olivia held Joseph back with a light touch on his arm. Walk with me. She led him to a small balcony off the executive floor, a space he had cleaned but never enjoyed. The autumn air was crisp, the city spread before them like a living map. You never told me Dr. Tanaka was a personal friend of Yamamoto's president. She said, her tone more curious than accusatory. I didn't know, Joseph admitted. My connection with him ended when I left Columbia. When Catherine got sick, I dropped everything else. Olivia studied him with penetrating intensity. You gave up a promising career to care for your wife. There was no choice to make, Joseph said simply. She needed me. And after she died, why stay a janitor for 5 years? With your qualifications, surely there were other options. Joseph turned to face the city, gathering his thoughts. How to explain the paralysis that follows profound loss, the way survival mode can become a prison of its own making. When you're drowning, he said finally, you don't think about swimming to shore. You just focus on keeping your head above water. He glanced at Olivia. Clara needed stability. I needed health insurance. The job provided both. And after a while, inertia takes over. You stop seeing possibilities beyond your current circumstances. Olivia absorbed this, her usual sharp edges softened by the morning light. Until someone offers you $1 million to translate Japanese. Joseph smiled despite himself. Until then, a comfortable silence settled between them. Not the awkward silence of CEO and janitor, but something closer to mutual understanding. Two people recognizing unexpected depth in each other. Your daughter, Olivia said suddenly. What does she think about all this? She thinks I'm a superhero who changed clothes. Joseph replied, the memory of Clara's words bringing warmth to his voice. She's too young to understand corporate hierarchies or social status. To her, I've always been important because I'm her father. Wise child, Olivia murmured almost to herself. Then straightening her shoulders, she was the CEO again. We should get back. The team will need guidance on the partnership structure. As they turned to leave the balcony, Joseph's phone rang the childcare center's number. A spike of alarm shot through him as he answered. This is Joseph Martinez. Mr. Martinez, this is Ms. Wilkins from the daycare. Clara had a small accident during the volcano experiment. She's fine, just a minor burn on her finger from the hot water. We've applied first aid, but she's asking for you. I'll be right there. Joseph ended the call, already moving toward the elevator. Problem, Olivia asked following. Clara burned her finger at the daycare. Nothing serious, but... Go, Olivia said firmly. Family first. The simple declaration, so at odds with corporate America's usual priorities, caught Joseph by surprise. He nodded gratefully and hurried to the elevator. The daycare center was calm when he arrived, no signs of emergency. Clara sat with Ms. Wilkins, her finger wrapped in a small bandage, tears dried on her cheeks, but her composure restored. Daddy? She launched herself into his arms. I was being a scientist and the volcano got too hot. Let me see, Joseph said, gently examining the bandaged finger. The burn was minor, a small red mark already fading. That's a scientist's battle scar. Shows how brave you are. Clara beamed at this characterization. Ms. Wilkins said I was very brave. I only cried a little bit. Ms. Wilkins approached with an apologetic smile. She really was very brave. We used warm water for the volcano demonstration, but it was a bit hotter than usual. I'm so sorry. These things happen, Joseph assured her. Thank you for taking good care of her. Clara tugged at his sleeve. Can I still stay and play? We're going to make moon sand after lunch. Joseph's tension eased, seeing she was truly fine. Of course you can if you want to. I do. She threw her arms around his neck, whispering in his ear. I love you, Daddy. Love you more, sunshine. As Joseph returned to the war room, he found the team deep in collaborative work. Jennifer had taken initiative in his absence, outlining the partnership structure with impressive attention to detail. He slipped back into his role, seamlessly guiding the development of their counterproposal with renewed focus. By mid-afternoon, they had created a comprehensive partnership model that achieved Yamamoto's core objectives while protecting Richardson's intellectual property. The mood was cautiously optimistic as they prepared for Olivia's review. Then Patricia burst into the room, her usual composure shattered. Turn on the news, Channel 7, now. Richard grabbed the remote, switching the wall-mounted screen to the local news channel. A perfectly coiffed anchor appeared with Richardson Industries logo displayed prominently beside her. Breaking news from downtown, where sources report that Richardson Industries, one of the city's largest employers, has been rocked by a major corruption scandal involving senior executives. The blood drained from Joseph's face as the camera switched to a reporter standing outside their building. I can confirm that 3 senior executives at Richardson Industries resigned yesterday following an internal investigation that uncovered evidence of embezzlement, contract fraud, and corporate espionage spanning several years. Richard cursed under his breath. What the hell is this? The reporter continued, her expression grave. Perhaps most shocking is the revelation that the whistleblower in this case is Joseph Martinez, a former janitor who was recently promoted to senior consultant. Joseph froze as his name echoed through the room. Every eye turned toward him in shock. Martinez has a controversial history. He was previously charged with embezzlement at his former employer, though those charges were later dropped. The charges weren't dropped, Joseph said, automatically, his voice hollow. I was completely exonerated. But the reporter was already continuing her words, twisting reality into something unrecognizable. Sources close to the investigation suggest that Martinez may have used his position as maintenance staff to gain unauthorized access to confidential documents in private conversations. There are also questions about whether his dramatic promotion represents appropriate corporate governance or potential blackmail of company leadership. The room erupted into chaos, accusations, Questions, demands for explanation, all directed at Joseph. Through the cacophony, one thought cut through his shock. Where had they gotten this information? He had told no one about his past except Olivia. As if summoned by his thoughts, Olivia burst into the room, her face tight with controlled fury. Everyone's silence. The room quieted immediately, the authority in her voice brooking no argument. This news report is unauthorized and contains significant inaccuracies. There is no corruption scandal at Richardson Industries. There have been no resignations due to embezzlement. Her eyes locked with Joseph's across the room. And Mr. Martinez's past has been thoroughly vetted by our HR department. The lie, smooth and confident, surprised Joseph. She hadn't had time to vet anything yet. She was defending him without hesitation. Richard, contact our legal team immediately. I want to know our options for addressing these false claims. Olivia's voice was steel. The rest of you back to work. The Yamamoto negotiations proceed as planned. As the team reluctantly returned to their task, whispers and sidelong glances following Joseph, Olivia gestured for him to join her in the hallway. My office, now. They walked in tense silence to her corner office. Once inside, Olivia closed the door and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. You told me you were exonerated, she said without preamble. I was. Joseph stood his ground, shoulders square. After 18 months of investigation, the charges were completely dismissed. My supervisor at Crawford Financial was the guilty party. He set me up to take the fall. Olivia studied him, assessing his truthfulness. And you didn't think this might be relevant information to share before I put you in charge of a $50 million negotiation? I told you about Catherine's illness, about why I took the janitor position. I didn't think the false accusations were relevant after 5 years. Well, they're relevant now. Olivia moved to her desk, pressing a button on her phone. Patricia, get me the board chairman immediately. Joseph's heart sank. This was it, the abrupt end to his second chance. Just as quickly as the opportunity had appeared, it would vanish. And Clara, what would he tell Clara? What happens now? He asked quietly. Olivia looked up, surprise flickering across her face. Now we fight back. I don't understand. Martinez, do you think I built this company by backing down every time someone tried to undermine me? Her laugh held no humor. This is a deliberate attack on you, on me, on the Yamamoto deal itself. Joseph processed this unexpected response. You're not firing me. Firing you? I just spent the last 24 hours integrating you into my core team, restructuring a major international deal around your expertise, and defending you to the executive committee. Olivia's eyes flashed. I don't abandon strategic assets because of a news report. The clinical assessment, Joseph as asset, not person, should have bothered him. Instead, he found it oddly reassuring. Olivia Richardson wasn't defending him out of sentiment or loyalty. She was defending him because she recognized his value. That kind of clear-eyed assessment wouldn't waver in the face of public opinion. Who leaked this? He asked. That's the right question. Olivia nodded approvingly. Who knew about your past at Crawford? Who had motive to discredit you specifically? Joseph thought carefully. I told only you about Catherine, about why I took the janitor position. I didn't mention Crawford specifically or the false accusations. Then how did they get that information? It's too specific to be coincidental. A cold realization settled over Joseph. My personnel file. When I applied here 5 years ago, I had to disclose the investigation even though I'd been cleared. The charges would have shown up in a background check. Olivia's expression darkened. Which means someone accessed your HR records. Someone with authorization. She pressed the intercom again. Patricia, cancel the call to the chairman. Instead, get me Margaret Chen from HR immediately. As they waited, Joseph's mind raced through the implications. Someone had deliberately dug into his past, twisted the facts, and leaked them to the media. Someone who wanted to discredit him, derail the Yamamoto negotiations, and possibly undermine Olivia's leadership. The timing is too perfect, he said slowly, the day before Yamamoto arrives, when we've just developed a counter-strategy that could save the deal. Exactly. Olivia's smile was sharp as a blade. Someone doesn't want this deal to succeed on our terms. The intercom buzzed. Miss Richardson and Margaret Chen is here? Send her in. The head of human resources entered, a severe woman in her 50s with calculating eyes and a permanently pinched expression. Joseph recognized her immediately, though he doubted she had ever noticed him during his years as a janitor. "Olivia," she greeted the CEO with forced warmth. "You wanted to see me?" Her eyes flickered dismissively over Joseph. "Margaret." Olivia's tone was deceptively casual. "I'm curious about something. Who would have access to employee personnel files, specifically background check information from 5 years ago?" Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. "That's highly confidential, of course. Only HR executives and the legal team would have such access. Why do you ask?" "Because someone leaked confidential information about Mr. Martinez to the media." Olivia's voice hardened. "Information that could only have come from his personnel file." Margaret's gaze shifted to Joseph, reassessing him with new wariness. I, I wasn't aware of any leak. This is the first I'm hearing of it." "Really?" Olivia picked up her tablet, pulling up the news report. "Then how do you explain this details about charges that were dismissed 5 years ago before Mr. Martinez joined Richardson Industries?" Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "Perhaps Mr. Martinez shared that information with someone else. Or perhaps the media conducted their own investigation." "In less than 24 hours, Joseph asked quietly, finding sealed court records from a case that was fully dismissed." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Martinez, while your sudden elevation has obviously impressed Olivia, the rest of us have questions about your qualifications and background. The board has a right to know who is representing this company in major negotiations." "The board," Olivia repeated, understanding dawning. "Did Richard put you up to this, Margaret? Or was it David from marketing?" Both of them seemed particularly disturbed by Martinez's promotion. Margaret straightened, abandoning pretense. "The executive committee has serious concerns about your judgment, Olivia. Promoting a janitor with a criminal record." "Dismissed charges are not a criminal record," Joseph interjected, his voice level, despite the anger building inside him. "I was the whistleblower who exposed the real criminal. My reward was 18 months of false accusations and the destruction of my career." Margaret's laugh was cold. "A convenient story, but why should anyone believe the janitor over respected executives who've built this company?" The confrontation was interrupted by Patricia's voice on the intercom. "Miss Richardson, the board chairman, is on line 1. He says it's urgent." Olivia's expression revealed nothing as she picked up the phone. "William, what a surprise." She listened for a moment, her eyes never leaving Margaret's face. "Yes, I've seen the news report." "No, it's not accurate. In fact, I was just discussing with Margaret Chen how confidential personnel information might have been leaked to the media." Margaret paled visibly. "An emergency board meeting," Olivia continued, "this afternoon. That seems precipitous, but if the board insists—" She paused, listening again. "Yes, Mr. Martinez will be there. I look forward to clearing up any misconceptions." She hung up her composure, unruffled, despite the obvious escalation. "The board of directors has called an emergency meeting for 4 o'clock. Discuss, and I quote, recent irregularities in company management and the appropriateness of certain personnel decisions." Margaret couldn't quite hide her satisfaction. "The board takes corporate governance very seriously, Olivia." "So I've noticed." Olivia's smile was dangerous. "You're dismissed, Margaret. I suggest you prepare your own explanation for how confidential HR information ended up on the local news." After Margaret departed, Joseph sank into a chair, the full weight of the situation settling over him. "I should resign immediately. My presence here is going to destroy everything we've worked to build." "Absolutely not." Olivia's voice was steel. "These people have undermined legitimate business operations and are now trying to destroy your reputation to save themselves. I won't allow it." "But the board doesn't know the full story yet." Olivia moved to her desk and began pulling files. "Dr. Tanaka is flying back from Japan specifically to testify about your character and expertise. President Yamamoto has offered to provide a written statement about the value you brought to our negotiations. And I have documentation of every cent you've saved this company in the past 24 hours. Joseph shook his head. "Olivia, you don't understand. It doesn't matter what the truth is. Perception becomes reality in situations like this. The media narrative is already set. I'm the criminal janitor who somehow manipulated his way into power. Then we change the narrative." She turned to face him, her expression fierce with determination. Joseph, you sacrificed your career to expose corruption, and it cost you everything. You've spent 5 years rebuilding your life while watching the same patterns play out around you. Now you have the chance to make it right. The use of his first name the first time she had called him Joseph instead of Martinez wasn't lost on him. Something had shifted between them, moving beyond the transactional relationship of CEO and consultant. "What are you proposing?" he asked finally. Olivia's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'm proposing that we go to that board meeting this afternoon and tell them exactly what kind of company they want Richardson Industries to be. Do they want a company where corruption is rewarded and whistleblowers are punished? Or do they want a company where integrity matters more than office politics?" She gathered the files into a briefcase. "The board is going to have to choose Joseph. And when they hear the full story, when they understand what you've sacrificed and what you've accomplished, I believe they'll make the right choice." Joseph looked at her for a long moment, seeing not just the CEO who had once mocked him, but a woman who had chosen to stake her own reputation on defending his character. "And if they don't make the right choice," Olivia's expression was resolute, "then we'll start our own company. You, me, and everyone else who believes that doing the right thing should be rewarded instead of punished." As they prepared for the most important board meeting in Richardson Industries history, Joseph was struck by the extraordinary reversal of his circumstances. 24 hours ago, he had been invisible, a man who cleaned floors while the powerful made decisions that shaped lives and fortunes. Now he stood shoulder to shoulder with the CEO, preparing to fight not just for his reputation, but for the soul of the company itself. Whatever happened next, Joseph Martinez was done being invisible. For Clara, for Catherine's memory, for his own dignity, he would stand and be seen. "I need to check on Clara before the board meeting," he said, gathering his resolve. "She needs to know everything is okay, even if it isn't." Olivia nodded. Family first. Again, that simple acknowledgement, so contrary to corporate culture, yet offered without hesitation. "The meeting is in 1 hour. War room 15 minutes before to coordinate our approach." Joseph made his way to the executive daycare mind, churning with strategies and contingencies. How had his life transformed so completely in the span of a day? From emptying trash bins to facing the board of directors, from invisibility to the center of a corporate storm. He found Clara happily engaged in creating moon sand with the other children, her bandaged fingers seemingly forgotten. She spotted him immediately, waving with enthusiastic joy. "Daddy, look what I made. It's like the moon, but you can build with it." Joseph knelt beside her, examining her creation with appropriate wonder. "That's amazing, Sunshine. You're a regular scientist." Clara beamed with pride, then studied his face with unexpected perceptiveness. "Are you okay, Daddy? You look worried, like when the car made the funny noise." Even at 6, she could read him perfectly. Joseph brushed back a strand of her dark hair, so like Catherine's. "I have a big meeting with important people. Sometimes that makes grown-ups nervous." Clara considered this seriously. "Mrs. Henderson says when you're nervous, you should remember that everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time." Joseph laughed, tension breaking momentarily. "Mrs. Henderson is very wise. And," Clara added, leaning close to whisper importantly, "remember that I think you're the best daddy in the whole world. Even better than Tommy's daddy who has a boat." Joseph pulled her into a tight hug, his heart full to bursting with love for this remarkable child. "Thank you, Sunshine. That helps more than you know." As he walked back toward the war room, Joseph's phone rang, Dr. Tanaka calling from the airport. "Joseph-san, I have arrived. My flight was fortunately on time." "Tanaka-sensei, thank you for coming on such short notice." The older man's voice carried both warmth and determination. "When I heard what was happening, I could not stay away. The media reports the accusations. They dishonor everything you have stood for." "You've seen the news?" "Yes, most disturbing, but I have brought something that may help. Records from the Crawford case. Proof of your innocence and your courage in exposing the real criminal." Relief washed through Joseph. "That could make all the difference. I will meet you before the board meeting." "And Joseph-san," Dr. Tanaka's voice softened, "I have always believed in you. Since your first day at Columbia, I saw in you not just intelligence, but integrity. That has not changed." The simple vote of confidence steadied Joseph's resolve as he entered the war room. The team had gathered Jennifer, Richard, and several others, their expressions a mix of concern, confusion, and curiosity. Martinez, Jennifer approached immediately. Is it true about Crawford Financial? Joseph met her gaze directly. It's true that I was accused. It's true that I was completely exonerated. And it's true that I was the whistleblower who exposed the real embezzler, my supervisor who fled the country with millions in client funds. Richard studied him with new eyes. Why didn't you say something about your background, your education? Would it have mattered? Joseph asked quietly. When you look at someone in a janitor's uniform, do you see Columbia degrees and business expertise? Or do you see someone who cleans up after you? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable but honest. Jennifer squared her shoulders. I want you to know that I'm behind you. Whatever happens in that board meeting, your work on the Yamamoto strategy was brilliant. No one can take that away. Her simple declaration of support from a young professional who had no obligation to risk her own standing touched Joseph deeply. Thank you, he said simply. The war room door opened as Olivia entered, followed by Dr. Tanaka. The professor's presence immediately commanded respect, his dignified bearing and serious expression setting the tone. Everyone, this is Dr. Kenji Tanaka, Professor Emeritus of International Business at Columbia University and a leading expert on Asian market dynamics. Olivia's introduction was formal but warm. He has graciously agreed to address the board regarding Mr. Martinez's qualifications and character. Dr. Tanaka bowed slightly. It is my honor to speak truth in defense of integrity. As the hour approached, Joseph felt a strange calm settling over him. The chaos of the past 24 hours, the sudden elevation, the strategic breakthroughs, the media attack, all of it had led to this moment of reckoning. Whatever happened next, he would face it with the dignity Catherine had always admired in him, with the courage he hoped to instill in Clara, with the integrity that defined him more surely than any job title ever could. The board awaited. The battle for truth and for Joseph Martinez's future was about to begin. The boardroom felt like a courtroom as Joseph Martinez and Olivia Richardson waited outside the heavy oak doors. Inside, 12 members of Richardson Industries' board of directors were assembling for the emergency meeting that would determine both their futures. Dr. Tanaka stood beside them, his calm presence a counterbalance to the tension crackling in the air. Are you ready for this? Olivia asked quietly. Her usual commanding tone softened into something more personal. Joseph straightened his tie, the dinosaur tie Clara had insisted he wear for luck. As ready as I'll ever be. The doors opened and Patricia appeared, her expression carefully neutral. They're ready for you now. The boardroom stretched before them, a massive table of polished mahogany surrounded by leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows, framing the city skyline. At the head sat William A. Turrison, the board chairman, a distinguished man in his 70s who had been Gordon Richardson's closest friend and business partner. His weathered face showed the strain of the current crisis. Miss Richardson, Mr. Martinez. Harrison nodded in formal greeting. And Dr. Tanaka, I presume. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. The other board members studied Joseph with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. He recognized several from corporate photographs, but had only ever seen a few in person, always from a distance, always while he was invisible. Harrison called the meeting to order, his deep voice resonating with authority. We're here to address the allegations of impropriety within company leadership and to evaluate the appropriateness of recent personnel decisions. He turned to Olivia. Miss Richardson, you have requested the opportunity to present evidence before this board makes any decisions regarding Mr. Martinez's employment or your own leadership. Olivia stood, her posture impeccable, her voice steady despite the stakes. Mr. Harrison, members of the board, what I'm about to share will fundamentally change how you understand the events of the past 48 hours and the past 5 years of this company's operations. She activated the presentation screen, beginning with Joseph's credentials degrees from Columbia, specializations in Asian markets, and cross-cultural negotiations. Languages spoken, awards received. The comprehensive display of his qualifications immediately shifted the atmosphere in the room. This is the man who has been cleaning our floors for 5 years, Olivia stated bluntly. A man whose expertise could have saved us millions in negotiation missteps, whose language skills could have prevented countless translation errors, whose strategic mind could have expanded our international presence. Instead, we relegated him to emptying our trash bins because we never looked beyond his uniform. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. 2 days ago, Olivia continued, I made a cruel, arrogant mistake. I publicly mocked Mr. Martinez and challenged him to translate a Japanese contract that our regular translator couldn't handle until next week. What happened next changed everything. She played the video recording from the conference room, Joseph's perfect translation, his identification of hidden clauses designed to undermine Richardson Industries, his insightful analysis of Yamamoto's true intentions. The board watched in stunned silence as the janitor they had never noticed dismantled a predatory contract with expert precision. Thanks to Mr. Martinez's intervention, Olivia concluded, we avoided a merger that would have effectively surrendered control of our technology to Yamamoto Corporation within 6 months. Instead, we've developed a partnership model that protects our interests while achieving our market expansion goals. Board member Patricia Williams raised her hand. While this is certainly impressive, Ms. Richardson, it doesn't address the allegations in today's news reports. Mr. Martinez's past legal troubles are concerning, particularly for someone in a senior position. I'm glad you raised that point, Mrs. Williams. Olivia nodded to Dr. Tanaka, who stepped forward with quiet dignity. Distinguished board members, he began his accented English, precise and measured. 7 years ago, Joseph Martinez was my most promising student at Columbia University. His thesis on cross-cultural business negotiation was published in the Harvard Business Review. Major firms were recruiting him before graduation. Dr. Tanaka opened a leather portfolio and withdrew several documents. In his first position at Crawford Financial, Joseph discovered his supervisor manipulating client accounts to cover gambling debts. He reported these findings to authorities, triggering an investigation. The professor laid out the timeline methodically, the supervisor's elaborate frame-up, the false charges against Joseph, the 18 months of investigation that eventually cleared his name completely but destroyed his career in the process. By the time justice was served, Dr. Tanaka concluded, Crawford Financial had collapsed. Joseph's reputation in the financial industry was irreparably damaged. No legitimate firm would hire him despite his complete exoneration. And all this while his wife was battling terminal cancer, leaving him with a young daughter to support alone. A heavy silence settled over the boardroom. Harrison's expression had softened visibly, his eyes reflecting a new understanding as he studied Joseph. Mr. Martinez, he said finally, why didn't you disclose your educational background when you applied here 5 years ago? Joseph stood, his posture straight but not rigid, his voice steady. Sir, I did disclose it. My application included my complete educational history and work experience. I was told I was overqualified for any open positions except maintenance staff. Harrison's eyebrows rose in surprise. And you accepted that assessment? My wife had just died after a long illness. I had a 2-year-old daughter mounting medical debts and no savings left. The maintenance position offered health insurance and stable hours. Joseph met Harrison's gaze directly. When you're responsible for a child's well-being, pride becomes a luxury you can't afford. The simple truth resonated through the room. Joseph could see recognition in several board members' eyes, particularly the older members who understood the weight of family responsibility. Board member Thomas Reynolds, a gruff veteran of the tech industry, leaned forward. So you cleaned floors for 5 years while holding degrees from Columbia, never said anything to anyone. I did my job, sir, the job I was hired to do. And observed everything, Reynolds noted shrewdly. I imagine you saw quite a lot in 5 years of being invisible. Joseph nodded cautiously. Yes, sir. Which brings us to another matter, Harrison interjected. This news report alleges that you used your position to gain unauthorized access to confidential documents. Is there any truth to that claim? Olivia stepped forward again. Mr. Harrison, we have reason to believe these allegations originated from within our executive team, specifically individuals who feel threatened by Mr. Martinez's sudden rise and the changes he's implementing. That's a serious accusation, Miss Richardson. Yes, it is. She activated the presentation again, displaying a series of internal emails and access logs. These records show that Margaret Chen from HR accessed Mr. Martinez's personnel file yesterday afternoon, shortly before the news report aired. They also show communications between Margaret Richardson and David Walsh, from marketing discussing containment strategies for what they call the Martinez situation. Board member Williams looked troubled. Are you suggesting our own executives leaked confidential information to discredit Mr. Martinez? I'm not suggesting it, Mrs. Williams. I'm stating it as fact backed by evidence. The board erupted into murmured discussions. Harrison raised a hand for silence, then turned to Joseph. Mr. Martinez, in your 5 years here, did you ever access confidential materials inappropriately or violate company privacy? Joseph shook his head firmly. No, sir. I observed what was in plain sight. Documents left on desks or in copy machines. Conversations held in public areas. Printouts discarded without shredding. I never accessed secure areas or private files. Yet you accumulated significant knowledge about our operations, Harrison noted. When you're treated as invisible people, speak and act freely around you. Joseph replied simply. I simply paid attention. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward again. If I may add something relevant to this discussion. He withdrew another document from his portfolio. Yesterday I spoke with Hiroshi Yamamoto, president of Yamamoto Corporation. He was disturbed to learn of his nephew's deceptive tactics in the merger negotiations. This letter expresses his personal appreciation for Mr. Martinez's ethical approach and his desire to work with Richards and Industries under the new partnership model. He handed the letter to Harrison, who read it with evident surprise. President Yamamoto specifically mentions Mr. Martinez's honorable character and strategic brilliance. Indeed, Dr. Tanaka nodded. Hiroshi-san remembers Joseph from a business conference 7 years ago, where Joseph presented research that influenced Yamamoto's approach to international partnerships. He has been wondering what happened to that promising young scholar. This revelation shifted the atmosphere yet again. The Janitor had not only prevented a disastrous merger, but had seemingly transformed it into a more advantageous partnership with the personal endorsement of Yamamoto's president. Harrison consulted quietly with several board members, then addressed the room. I believe we've heard enough to make some initial determinations. This board needs to consider all the evidence presented today. Miss Richardson, Mr. Martinez, Dr. Tanaka, would you excuse us for a few minutes while we deliberate? As they waited in the anteroom outside, Joseph felt strangely calm. Whatever happened next, he had stood in that boardroom as his true self, not the invisible man in the maintenance uniform, but Joseph Martinez, educated, capable, and dignified. You did well in there, Olivia said quietly. Better than most seasoned executives I've seen face the board. Truth makes for a strong foundation, Joseph replied. Catherine used to say that. Your wife sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was, Joseph smiled at the memory. Brilliant, compassionate, stubborn as hell when she believed in something. She would have liked you, I think. Olivia looked genuinely surprised. Me, the arrogant CEO who mocked you. The determined leader who recognized her mistake and corrected course immediately, Joseph amended. Catherine respected people who could admit when they were wrong. Before Olivia could respond, Patricia appeared at the door. They're ready for you. They returned to the boardroom where Harrison stood at the head of the table. The other board members' expressions gave nothing away as Joseph, Olivia, and Dr. Tanaka took their places. Mr. Martinez, Miss Richardson, Harrison began formally, this board has reached several decisions. Joseph felt his heartbeat quicken, the calm of moments ago replaced by the real understanding of what was at stake, not just a well, but a second chance at the career he'd lost at providing Clara with the future Catherine had dreamed of for her. First, Harrison continued, this board formally commends Mr. Martinez for his intervention in the Yamamoto negotiations, which saved this company from significant financial and intellectual property losses. A ripple of relief passed through Joseph, but Harrison wasn't finished. Second, we unanimously approve Ms. Richardson's recommendation to appoint Mr. Martinez as Chief Operating Officer with full authority to restructure our International Operations Division. Joseph's breath caught in his throat. Chief Operating Officer, not just a consultant or advisor, but the second highest position in the company. He glanced at Olivia, who allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Third, Harrison continued, this board authorizes a full forensic audit of company operations with particular attention to the activities of the executive team members implicated in today's information leak. We take breaches of confidentiality and trust extremely seriously. His expression grew solemn as he addressed Joseph directly. Finally, Mr. Martinez, this board wishes to formally apologize for the years of wasted talent and overlooked contributions. Richardson Industries should have recognized your value long ago. We failed in our duty of proper oversight, and for that we are sincerely sorry. The simple, direct apology, unexpected and unequivocal, touched Joseph more deeply than the promotion or vindication. For 5 years he had been unseen. Now he was not only seen, but valued his dignity, affirmed by the most powerful people in the company. "Thank you, sir," he said simply, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out, many stopping to shake Joseph's hand and congratulate him, Harrison held him back with a gentle touch on his arm. "Martinez, a word," the older man said, gesturing to two chairs by the window. When they were seated, Harrison studied Joseph with thoughtful eyes. "Gordon Richardson, Olivia's father and my oldest friend, built this company on a principle that I fear we've forgotten in recent years. He believed that character matters more than credentials, that integrity outweighs influence." The board chairman gazed out at the city spread below them. "He would have been ashamed that we overlooked someone of your caliber, because we couldn't see past a uniform. But he would have been proud of how you've conducted yourself through all of this." "Thank you, sir." Harrison turned back to Joseph, his expression serious. "The role of COO isn't just about business strategy or operational efficiency. It's about setting the cultural tone for the entire organization. What kind of company do you want Richardson Industries to be, Mr. Martinez?" The question caught Joseph by surprise, not the query itself, but the fact that Harrison genuinely wanted his answer, valued his vision. "I want it to be a place where people are judged by their contributions, not their titles," Joseph said after a moment's reflection. "Where integrity is rewarded, not punished. Where every employee, from the maintenance staff to the executive suite, is treated with basic human dignity." Harrison nodded slowly. "That sounds remarkably like the company Gordon intended to build." He stood extending his hand. "I look forward to seeing your vision implemented, Chief Operating Officer Martinez." As Joseph left the boardroom, he found Olivia waiting in the hallway. "COO," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "I was going to suggest VP of International Operations, but the board went straight to the top." "Your recommendation," Joseph asked, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. "My suggestion," their enthusiastic approval. Olivia's smile was genuine. "You earned it, Joseph, not just with your work on Yamamoto, but with how you've handled yourself through this entire situation. Most people would have broken under the pressure or sought revenge. You stayed focused on solutions." They walked together toward the elevator, their steps naturally falling into sync. "There's one more thing we need to do today," Olivia said as they reached the executive floor. "What's that?" "Tell your daughter about her father's new job." Her expression softened in a way Joseph wouldn't have thought possible 2 days ago. "Family first, remember." Joseph checked his watch, surprised to find it was already past 5. The board meeting had lasted longer than he realized. "The daycare center will be closing soon. Then we'd better hurry." The "we" wasn't lost on Joseph. This powerful CEO, who yesterday had mocked a janitor for sport, was now personally invested in sharing his good news with Clara. The transformation was as remarkable as his own change in circumstances. They found Clara in the daycare, one of the last children remaining, carefully coloring a picture of what appeared to be a businessman surrounded by smiling people. "Daddy," she cried when she spotted him abandoning her artwork to launch herself into his arms. "I was drawing you at your superhero job. Ms. Wilkins helped me spell negotiation, but I think I still got it wrong." Joseph hugged her tightly, his heart full to bursting. "It looks perfect to me, sunshine." Clara noticed Olivia standing nearby and studied her with open curiosity. "Are you Daddy's boss? You're very pretty." Olivia seemed momentarily flustered by the direct child's question, perhaps the first time Joseph had seen her genuinely caught off guard. Yes, I'm your father's boss. My name is Olivia." Clara nodded seriously. "Daddy says his new job is helping people make good choices about business. Is that right?" "Your daddy is very smart about business," Olivia confirmed, kneeling to Clara's level in her expensive suit, another gesture Joseph wouldn't have thought possible yesterday. "In fact, he's so smart that he just got a big promotion." Clara's eyes widened. "What's a promotion?" "It means I have a new job title," Joseph explained, "Chief Operating Officer. That means I help run the whole company." Clara considered this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. Is that better than being a superhero? Joseph laughed, the joy of the moment washing away the tension of the past 2 days. It's different, but just as important. As they gathered Clara's things, and Joseph realized he had no plan for getting home. The buses would be running their rush hour schedule, crowded and slow. I'll drive you, Olivia said, reading his thoughts. Both of you. The offer surprised him, but he accepted with a grateful nod. As they rode the executive elevator down to the parking garage, Clara held Joseph's hand and stared in wide-eyed fascination at Olivia. Your shoes are very pointy, she observed. Olivia glanced down at her designer heels. Yes, they are. Do they hurt your feet? Mrs. Henderson says beauty is pain, but Daddy says that's silly talk. Olivia's laugh was unexpected and genuine. Your daddy is right. They do hurt sometimes, but I keep wearing them anyway. Not very sensible of me. Clara nodded wisely. Daddy always wears comfortable shoes. He says when your feet hurt, your whole body knows it. Smart man, your father. In the parking garage, Olivia led them to her sleek black luxury sedan. Clara gasped with delight at the soft leather interior and the way the seats adjusted automatically. Your car is fancy, it's like a spaceship. As they drove through the evening traffic toward Joseph's neighborhood, Clara chattered happily about her day at the daycare, the volcano experiment, the moon sand, the new friends she'd made. Joseph watched her animated face in the rearview mirror, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. When Olivia pulled up in front of their apartment building, Clara was mid-story about how she had taught the other children to fold napkins the fancy way that Mrs. Henderson had shown her. And then you tuck the corner under like this, she demonstrated with an imaginary napkin, and it looks like a bird. That's very impressive, Olivia said, clearly charmed despite herself. You're a good teacher, Clara. The little girl beamed at the praise. Daddy says teaching others is the best way to learn something well. Your daddy is full of wisdom, Olivia observed, glancing at Joseph with new appreciation. As they prepared to exit the car, Clara turned to Olivia with sudden seriousness. Would you like to come up for dinner? Daddy makes the best spaghetti in the whole world on Tuesdays. Joseph opened his mouth to politely excuse Olivia from such an obligation, but she spoke first. I'd like that very much, Clara, if it's all right with your father. Joseph found himself nodding, as surprised by Olivia's acceptance as by Clara's invitation. We have plenty. Their small apartment, with its worn furniture and carefully maintained cleanliness, presented a stark contrast to the luxury Olivia was accustomed to. Yet she entered without a hint of condescension, accepting Clara's enthusiastic tour of our castle with genuine interest. And this is my room, Clara announced, pulling Olivia by the hand to show off her small bedroom with its cheerful yellow walls and carefully arranged stuffed animals. Daddy painted it sunshine color because Mommy always called me her sunshine. Joseph, preparing ingredients in the kitchen, felt a pang at the mention of Catherine. Clara rarely spoke of her mother to strangers, yet something about Olivia had earned the child's immediate trust. It's a beautiful room, Olivia said, admiring Clara's artwork displayed on the walls. You're quite the artist. Daddy hangs up all my best pictures. He says art should be shared. Clara pointed to a particular drawing, a colorful family portrait labeled Daddy, Me, and Mommy in Heaven. That's my favorite. Daddy says Mommy can see all my pictures from heaven. Olivia's expression softened as she studied the childish rendering of the family. I'm sure she loves them. In the kitchen, Joseph found himself moving with automatic efficiency, chopping onions and garlic, browning meat, adding tomatoes and herbs to the sauce. The familiar routine grounded him amid the surreal circumstances of his day. Chief Operating Officer. The title still felt foreign, disconnected from the reality of his small apartment and modest life. What would Catherine have thought of this sudden reversal of fortune? He could almost hear her laugh, warm and musical, and her voice saying, I always told you that honesty finds its reward eventually. Can I help? Olivia appeared in the kitchen doorway, having shed her suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of her silk blouse. Joseph blinked in surprise. You want to help with dinner? Clara is setting the table and gave me strict instructions to make myself useful, Olivia explained with a small smile. Apparently in this house, everyone contributes. She's right about that. Joseph handed her a block of Parmesan and a grater. If you don't mind. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, the domestic scene so incongruous with their professional relationship that Joseph couldn't help but marvel at it. Yesterday, Olivia Richardson had been an untouchable figure of corporate power, someone who looked through him rather than at him. Today, she was grating cheese in his kitchen while his daughter arranged napkins at their small dining table. "You're a good father," Olivia said quietly, breaking the silence. "Clara is remarkable." "Thank you." Joseph stirred the sauce, adding a pinch of sugar to cut the acidity. "Catherine and I always wanted her to grow up confident and kind. After Catherine died, I worried about raising her alone, about whether I could give her everything she needs." "You've done an extraordinary job," Olivia said with unexpected sincerity. "She's thoughtful, articulate, and has a natural empathy that's rare in children her age." Joseph glanced at her curiously. "You seem to know a lot about children." Olivia's focus remained on the cheese she was grating, but something in her expression shifted. "My younger sister has 3 kids. I don't see them as often as I should, but children have always fascinated me. They see the world as it is, not as we pretend it to be." The simple admission, a glimpse of Olivia's personal life, struck Joseph as significant. This woman guarded her privacy fiercely, yet here she was, offering a small window into herself. Dinner was served at the small table, Clara proudly distributing the perfectly folded napkins and insisting that Olivia take the special plate with the unbroken edge. The conversation flowed with surprising ease, Clara's innocent questions drawing out sides of Olivia that Joseph suspected few people ever saw. "Do you have a daddy?" Clara asked between bites of spaghetti. "I did," Olivia replied. "He died 3 years ago." "Like my mommy," Clara nodded with the immediate connection children make. "Do you miss him a lot?" Joseph started to intervene. Such personal questions might be unwelcome, but Olivia answered with simple honesty. "Every day, he built the company where your daddy and I work. He taught me everything I know about business." "My daddy teaches me things too," Clara said proudly. "How to tie my shoes and count money and why the sky is blue." "Those are very important things to know," Olivia agreed seriously. As they finished dinner, Clara stifled a yawn, the excitement of the day finally catching up with her. Joseph checked his watch, well past her usual bedtime. "Time for bath and pajamas, sunshine." Clara nodded sleepily but turned to Olivia first. "Will you come visit again? You can have the special plate next time too." Something flickered in Olivia's eyes, surprise perhaps, or an emotion Joseph couldn't quite identify. "I'd like that very much, Clara. Thank you for inviting me." While Joseph supervised Clara's bedtime routine, Olivia insisted on clearing the table and washing dishes, another unexpected gesture from the CEO, who probably had a housekeeper for such tasks in her own home. When Joseph returned from tucking Clara in, he found Olivia examining the photographs on his small bookshelf, Catherine in her graduation gown, Clara as a newborn, the 3 of them in happier days before the diagnosis. "She was beautiful," Olivia said softly, indicating a picture of Catherine. "Yes," Joseph agreed, the familiar ache of loss present, but dulled by time, inside and out. "Clara has her smile," Olivia set the frame back carefully, "and your determination." Joseph made coffee and they settled in the small living room, the domesticity of the scene at odds with the corporate drama they had navigated earlier. "Thank you," Joseph said after a comfortable silence, "for everything, the opportunity, the support with the board dinner with Clara. It's been an extraordinary 2 days." Olivia cradled her coffee mug, her expression thoughtful. "I should be thanking you. You saved the Yamamoto deal and exposed corruption that could have undermined the entire company." She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. "But more than that, you've reminded me of something important that I'd forgotten." "What's that?" "That leadership isn't about power or position. It's about seeing people, really seeing them and recognizing their value." Her gaze met his directly. "I've been so focused on proving myself worthy of my father's legacy that I stopped looking beyond titles and credentials. If I hadn't made that cruel challenge 2 nights ago, I might never have discovered what was right in front of me for 5 years." The admission, honest and unguarded, revealed a vulnerability Joseph hadn't expected from the formidable CEO. "We all have blind spots," he offered. "What matters is how we respond when they're exposed." Olivia nodded, accepting the generous interpretation of her behavior. "Tomorrow is going to be complicated," she said, shifting to practical matters. The media will want statements about your appointment in the Yamamoto partnership. HR will need to process your official transition and will need to address the executive committee's breach of trust. One step at a time, Joseph said, the phrase a mantra he'd lived by since Catherine's death. We'll handle each challenge as it comes. Olivia repeated, a small smile playing at her lips, already thinking like a COO. As she prepared to leave, Olivia paused at the door. I meant what I said it to the board, Joseph. You've earned this position with your expertise and integrity. But there's something else you should know. What's that? I'm not just making you COO because of what you know about business or international markets. Her expression was earnest, stripped of corporate calculation. I'm making you COO because of who you are, a man who maintained his dignity and compassion through circumstances that would have broken most people. Richardson Industries needs that kind of leadership. The simple truth of her statement, recognition not just of his skills, but of his character, touched Joseph deeply. I'll do my best to live up to that faith. I know you will. Olivia hesitated, then added, Clara's lucky to have you as her father, and I'm fortunate to have you as my COO. After she departed, Joseph stood at the window watching her car pull away from the curb. 2 days ago, he had been invisible, a man who cleaned floors while dreaming of the career he'd lost, a father struggling to provide his daughter with opportunities he could no longer access for himself. Now, against all odds, he had been given a second chance, not just at professional success, but at creating the kind of world he wanted Clara to inherit, one where integrity mattered, where people were valued for their contributions rather than their titles, where second acts were possible, even after devastating setbacks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new battles to fight. But tonight, for the first time in years, Joseph Martinez allowed himself to feel something he had almost forgotten: hope. 6 months later, the spring sunshine streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Joseph's corner office, casting warm light across the architectural plans spread across his desk. In the 6 months since his appointment as COO, Richardson Industries had undergone a transformation as dramatic as his own change in circumstances. The Yamamoto partnership had exceeded all expectations, opening Asian markets to Richardson's technology while establishing new standards for cross-cultural business relationships. The executive restructuring necessary after the exposure of corruption within the senior leadership had allowed Joseph to build a team based on merit rather than connections. Most significantly, Joseph had implemented his Dignity Initiative, a company-wide program ensuring that every employee, regardless of position, received fair compensation, respect, and opportunities for advancement. The maintenance staff now participated in monthly roundtable discussions with senior leadership. The cafeteria workers had health benefits equal to those of mid-level managers. The security guards received tuition assistance for continuing education. A knock at his door interrupted Joseph's review of the plans for Richardson Industries' new research campus. Come in, he called, looking up to see Jennifer Chen enter with a tablet in hand. The quarterly reports are ready for your review, she said, her confidence having grown substantially in her new role as Director of International Partnerships. And Dr. Tanaka sent the latest market analysis from Tokyo. Thank you, Jennifer. Joseph gestured to the chair across from his desk. How are the preparations for the Yamamoto delegation coming along? On schedule. President Yamamoto confirmed he'll be attending personally. Jennifer smiled. He specifically mentioned looking forward to seeing you again. Joseph nodded, pleased. The relationship with Yamamoto had become one of mutual respect rather than the predatory arrangement originally proposed, a victory for both companies. And the other matter we discussed, he asked. Jennifer's smile widened. The Richardson Scholarship Fund for Economics and International Studies has been established at Columbia. The first awards will be announced next fall, 5 full scholarships for students with financial need. Joseph felt a wave of satisfaction. The scholarship had been his personal project, a way to create opportunities for students like himself, those with potential but limited resources. Excellent. Make sure the criteria emphasize character and work ethic alongside academic achievement. Already done. Jennifer hesitated, then added, the board is also prepared to approve your proposal for the Employee Child Care Center at today's meeting. It would be available to all staff regardless of position. This news particularly pleased Joseph. The center would be modeled after the executive daycare but accessible to every employee eliminating one of the biggest barriers for working parents, especially single parents like himself. Thank you, Jennifer, for everything. After she departed, Joseph stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city below. From this height, the same height he had once cleaned windows, the people on the streets looked tiny, almost invisible. But Joseph never forgot what it felt like to be one of those seemingly small figures carrying the weight of responsibility and dreams. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Boardroom in 10, big news. In the 6 months of their partnership, Joseph and Olivia had developed a relationship built on mutual respect and complementary strengths. Her visionary drive balanced by his practical wisdom, her corporate savvy enhanced by his people-first approach. Together, they had transformed Richardson Industries from a company focused solely on profit to one that valued both results and responsibility. Joseph straightened his tie, no cartoon dinosaurs today, but a subtle blue silk that Clara had helped him select, and gathered his materials for the board meeting. As he moved through the executive floor, he exchanged greetings with staff members at all levels. Unlike his predecessor, Joseph knew everyone by name, from the recently hired mail clerk to the senior vice presidents. He found Olivia outside the boardroom reviewing notes with her characteristic intensity. She looked up as he approached, her smile warm and genuine, a far cry from the cold, dismissive executive he had first encountered. Ready for this? She asked. Should I be concerned about big news? Olivia's eyes sparkled with something like mischief, an expression that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Not concerned, maybe excited. The board meeting proceeded with its usual efficiency under Harrison's leadership. The quarterly results were reviewed exceptional, the new initiatives approved unanimously, and the strategic plan updated ambitious, but achievable. Throughout, Joseph noted the marked change in how the board members engaged with him, no longer the unexpected janitor turned executive, but a respected leader whose judgment they valued. After the standard agenda items were completed, Harrison turned to Olivia. Miss Richardson, I believe you have a special announcement. Olivia stood, her posture reflecting both confidence and a hint of ceremony. As you all know, Richardson Industries has traditionally focused on domestic markets with limited international exposure. Our partnership with Yamamoto Corporation has changed that dynamic, opening unprecedented opportunities in Asian markets. The board members nodded in agreement, several making appreciative noises. What you may not know, Olivia continued, is that we've received acquisition offers from 3 major competitors in the past month alone, each offering substantial premiums over our current market valuation. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. Joseph straightened in his chair, this news genuinely unexpected. After careful consideration, Olivia said, her gaze meeting Joseph's briefly. I've declined all 3 offers. Instead, I'm proposing something much more ambitious. She activated the presentation screen, revealing a comprehensive global expansion plan, new research centers in Tokyo, London, and Singapore, manufacturing facilities in strategic locations, distribution networks spanning 5 continents. Richardson Global, she announced, a transformation that will position us not just as a domestic leader, but as an international force in sustainable technology. The board members leaned forward, captivated by the bold vision. Harrison's weathered face broke into a broad smile, the expression of a man seeing his friend's legacy expanding beyond expectations. This initiative, Olivia continued, will require new leadership structures, regional presidents, international directors, cultural liaisons. She paused, turning directly to Joseph, and a new CEO to oversee our domestic operations while I focus on international expansion as executive chairwoman. Joseph felt a jolt of surprise. Was she suggesting what it seemed? I am formally recommending to this board, Olivia stated clearly, that Joseph Martinez be appointed CEO of Richardson Industries effective immediately. The room fell silent as the weight of her proposal settled over everyone present. Joseph found himself momentarily speechless. The trajectory from janitor to CEO in 6 months was beyond anything he could have imagined. Harrison recovered first, his expression thoughtful. That's quite a recommendation, Olivia, especially given the unconventional nature of Mr. Martinez's rise within the company. Unconventional, yes, Olivia acknowledged, but look at the results. She displayed the performance metrics since Joseph's appointment as COO, productivity up 22%, employee satisfaction increased by 35%, turnover reduced by 40%. Beyond the numbers, she continued, Joseph has demonstrated exactly the leadership qualities Richardson Industries needs in this new chapter: ethical decision-making, strategic vision, and the ability to see value where others miss it. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of surprise and consideration. Joseph found his voice at last. While I'm honored by your confidence, he said carefully, this proposal comes as a complete surprise. The board should have time to consider all possible candidates for such an important position. Olivia's smile held a hint of the same mischief he'd noticed earlier. Always the voice of prudence and fairness, which is precisely why you're the right choice. She turned back to the board. I prepared a complete briefing on Joseph's qualifications, his accomplishments as COO, and my transition plan as I move into the executive chair role. I ask that you review these materials and make your decision at next month's meeting. Harrison nodded, clearly impressed by the thoroughness of her approach. A reasonable request. We'll take this under serious consideration, Olivia. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out, many stopping to congratulate Joseph on his potential promotion, Harrison held them both back. Martinez Richardson, he said, gesturing to the chairs near the window, the same spot where he had spoken to Joseph 6 months earlier. A moment of your time. When they were seated, Harrison studied them both with shrewd eyes. This partnership between you two has exceeded every expectation, he said frankly. When you first brought Martinez into the executive team, Olivia, I had serious reservations. Not about his qualifications, which were impeccable, but about how the organization would respond to such an unusual transition. I remember, Olivia acknowledged. 6 months later, I can say without reservation that it was one of the best decisions in this company's history. Harrison's weathered face creased in a smile. Gordon would be proud of both of you. The mention of Olivia's father, the company's founder, and Harrison's old friend clearly touched her. Thank you, William. That means a great deal. Harrison turned his attention to Joseph. The CEO recommendation took you by surprise, I see. Completely, Joseph admitted. It's not something I ever aspired to or expected, which is precisely why you're worthy of consideration, Harrison noted with approval. The best leaders are often those who don't seek power for its own sake. After Harrison departed, Joseph and Olivia walked together toward their offices, a comfortable silence between them. You might have warned me, Joseph said finally, a hint of amusement in his voice. And missed the look on your face. Not a chance. Olivia's smile faded into something more serious. You deserve this, Joseph. Not because of your education or experience, though those are exceptional, but because of who you are, a man who cleaned floors with the same dignity he brings to the boardroom. The simple truth of her assessment, recognition of his character, rather than just his credentials, touched Joseph deeply. Thank you, he said simply, for seeing beyond the uniform. That's the irony, isn't it? Olivia mused. I never really saw you until you were in that uniform, standing up to my arrogance with quiet dignity. As they reached the executive suite, Olivia checked her watch. Isn't it time to pick up Clara from school? Family first, remember. Joseph nodded, grateful that even amid talk of CEO positions and global expansion, his priorities remained clear and respected. Speaking of Clara, Olivia added casually, she mentioned you're taking her to the Natural History Museum this weekend, the dinosaur exhibit. That's right, she's been obsessed with paleontology since watching that documentary series. She may have mentioned that I'm something of a dinosaur enthusiast myself, Olivia said, a hint of hesitation in her voice, so unlike her usual confidence. If you wouldn't mind company. The invitation, personal rather than professional, suggested a new dimension to their evolving relationship. Joseph found himself smiling at the thought of Olivia Richardson, corporate powerhouse, enthusiastically discussing Triceratops with his 6-year-old daughter. We'd like that, he said sincerely. Clara would be thrilled. As Joseph left the office that afternoon to pick up his daughter from school, he reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 6 months. From invisible to indispensable, from maintenance staff to potential CEO, a transformation that defied all expectation. Yet the most meaningful changes weren't found in titles or corner offices. They were in the culture he had helped build, where every employee was seen and valued. In the scholarship fund that would open doors for students facing the same barriers he had encountered. In the childcare center that would ease the burden for working parents like himself. And most importantly, in Clara's growing confidence and happiness. No longer did she need to imagine her father as important in that shiny building. She knew with certainty that he was making a difference, not just for their small family, but for everyone whose lives were touched by Richardson Industries. Joseph spotted Clara waiting on the school steps, her face lighting up as she saw him approach. She waved excitedly, then broke into a run, launching herself into his waiting arms. Daddy Mizza. Thompson said my dinosaur report was the best in the class. She said I could be a scientist one day if I want to. Joseph hugged her tightly, his heart full to bursting with love and pride. You can be anything you set your mind to, sunshine. Absolutely anything. As they walked hand in hand toward home, Joseph Martinez, once invisible, now seen and valued for his true worth, felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. Not just to professional success, but to a life of meaning and purpose. A life worthy of Catherine's memory and Clara's future. A life that proved beyond any doubt that true worth can never remain hidden forever.